that don't know, we're actually got a video stream going on in the session. So we've got cameras, one camera at the back of the room and two at the front of the room, which will track, apparently will track me as I'm kind of walking around, but it will also video yourselves. So don't get distracted by that kind of going off. But the main thing is we're going to be looking at the PowerPoint presentation in the top corner. So we'll kick off and hopefully today you are here to learn a little bit more about supply chain. Straight away, we have a technical issue. Apologies for this. Obviously, we've practiced many times. It's worked absolutely fine. And now, go. Just very, very quickly, in terms of who I am, and a little bit about my experience. So I'm a trainer for the Supply Chain Academy. Been working with Supply Chain Academy for about 3 years now, something along those lines, delivering various different internal and external courses for Supply Chain Academy. In terms of my background, I know I don't look it, but I've got 25 years worth of experience working within operational and supply chain type roles. Types of companies that you will have heard of, the likes of Sainsbury's, IKEA, I'm sure you've definitely heard of those guys. For those who of a certain age, which obviously I fall into this bracket, there's a company called Shop Direct on here, which used to be Case Catalogs or Great Universal. I worked with those guys as well. They've changed their name a few times. SIG is a building company. They supply everything except for bricks to build commercial properties, and also worked for 2 US companies that have worked in the class of the IT sector. So they've done IT physical products and also software as well. So what we would do is manufacture vending machines and cables and connectivity type devices. So the reason I tell you about my background is I work with some nice, big, chunky corporate companies, all around process, around being as efficient and working on those cost-saving activities. Then working in some slightly smaller businesses that haven't had structure, haven't had organisation in there, and my role was very much to come and bring that into those businesses and help drive them forward. But very flexible, nimble SMEs looking to try and drive profit to bottom line, but be flexible in terms of working with the different types of customers they're kind of working with. So a lot of that is very applicable to Supply Chain Academy and where we are in terms of our development and moving forward. And one thing I did miss up on there, not deliberately, was I also spent some time with Aston University. So I spent 4 years working at Aston University across a number of different projects for those guys, again, working with large SMEs and also some medium-sized SMEs across the country as well, just delivering supply chain excellence into those businesses. So I've got an interesting, varied background of working with different types of organisations with different types of challenges that they may have. Most of you are obviously be part of our group, part of the GB Global group. And I must admit, I was really shocked and surprised to see how many different companies that sit under our parent group of GB Global Group. And obviously, somewhere within there is Supply Chain Academy, which I can't see because I'm too close to the screen. But certainly there's Uniserv up there, which we are part of. So I think what you can see here is that is the GB Global Group covers everything and anything and all of your supply chain logistics and training needs. So if anybody needs an introduction to any of these organizations, then come back to us so we can kind of help you in terms of those introductions. And for those physically in the room, obviously that picture means something to you because you're in that physical building. For those online, this is our headquarters at Supply Chain Academy in Upminster, where we're delivering the training today. We do a number of different types of training, which is either in person or we do it online. It's a combination of both. But we have a wonderful facility down here, which is a base for Uniserv. And it's a wonderful training facility that we can invite people to. And we actually have rooms on site as well. So if you want to stay overnight, you can stay here and be nice and fresh for your courses that you're having them delivered to. And those courses are things like apprenticeships. So we do a level 3 apprenticeship, we do a level 5 apprenticeship, and we also do a number of other courses, such as the one that you're on today, which will deliver, say, at Supply Chain Academy. And you can see on screen now a number of our customers that kind of worked with. I think fundamentally, They are massive companies, really big organizations that we partner with, that we work directly with. And obviously that list goes on and on and on. Recently, the Supply Chain Academy team had a training session on Sugar, our CRM system, and the amount of clients that we're working with on that system is just unbelievable. But it shows they are top draw, top quality clients that we work with through the Supply Chain Academy and through Uniserve and the rest of the group. Okay, this is the bit that everybody hates, because I'm going to ask you guys just to say hello. Now, some of you might know each other very well. I know some of you, but I don't know all of you. But what I'm going to ask you to do is just to say what your name is, the department you work in, and also this helps me, and I'm not going to test you on it, just understand where your supply chain knowledge is. So is it a case of, I haven't got a clue, up to number 10, which is, yeah, I could run this course, Jamie. I'm much better than you. So if you could give me a bit of an idea of where you are in terms of your supply chain knowledge, that would be really useful. And that doesn't have to be, if you're within the group, it doesn't have to be your knowledge within the group. It's generally sort of what you've picked up as you've kind of gone along. So I'm in no particular order. Charlotte? Just easy if I work that way, right? If that's okay, if you can just explain, just very, very quickly.
Yeah, so I work in the GTM department, that's the trade relations.
Okay.
Supply chain knowledge. Let's just say 5 to make it.
Fine, yeah.
But maybe 6.
Okay. So obviously the idea of today is to try and get you up one number up that, or at least one number up that ladder. So to go from a 5 to 6, that's kind of the idea behind it. Brilliant, thank you. So.
And so we also with the end to get all assistant in delivery. The or maybe in like sometimes in very close different comments, but I think every time it's so much more learn. So with the saying for
Brilliant. Tina.
Tina. Yes, pleasure. As means business development manager. I think when I first started my supply chain knowledge was, and that's how I say, they with 6 almost.
Brilliant. Loretta.
I'm the shirt I work with HR. Supply chain knowledge, I'm sent through. It's been nice to get up to a 4 or 5.
Yeah. I will try. No promises. Okay.
I would give myself 2.
Connor.
Life experience at the Hellhounds Archery Academy. I was going to say about 5. Yeah, probably about 1.
We like
Yeah.
Interestingly, depending on which department you work in, you may be know a lot within that particular department. So you could be a 10 out of 10, but in another department you're kind of a 0. So it's kind of finding that kind of medium ground. Today we're going to kind of go through headlines front to back. So you're going to have that sort of overarching knowledge, but we're not going to go into massive amounts of detail. I don't think we're going to go into massive amounts of detail. However, if a question pops up, we'll go a little bit deeper. Joe.
Yeah, Joe from George Baker's commercial team. I'd say my supply chain knowledge program. I think still not a great review, so I'd say, but
Magic. Lovely. One to watch.
this question. So HR and
Okay. Lovely. Thank you. Right. Okay. Thank you. I can't see your name. Sarah.
Sarah, I work in the marketing department. Knowledge.
Okay. Good. Yeah. Paul.
I'm Paul, able to not say
Magic.
Seeds level school training skills, apprenticeships to facilitation business providers. I want to have been part of it 2 or 3. It'd be good to get a bit more some support. This is good for training for that.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Come in.
Thank you. That's it.
Yeah, I'm Penny. I work in the data selling group IT department. I study that from the side. My previous job, I worked in supply chain, my retail perspective.
Okay.
This side, what we do is
Yeah.
pick up and what companies and what started here, I put my partners knowledge. All other terms, I do nothing without. That's what I'm like, so.
But I think depending on the organisation you work in, they work slightly differently. So what you think is the right way, you know, a company does it a different way. But that's fine. Thank you, Ken.
Hi, I'm Setu. I work in the digital transformation team.
Okay.
So we mostly deal with data. So I would say my knowledge would be like 5 because I started learning only after joining this company about supply chain and what the data means because we work in data. So we have to like what's that. But it's still 5.
Gotcha. Fine.
I'm Sanjay, works in the BA department. About the knowledge, I want to say 10,
10.
but this exclude the 0.
Yes. Over to you.
Cool.
Okay. So you have
Yeah.
knowledge. It's 1. Or 1. Okay. Right.
So, you give it a chat saying that. It's quite dangerous, isn't it?
Good question. So for the online guys, can you hear me okay? Or is it the rest of the attendees?
So we can hear you, but can't hear anything the attendees are saying at all. I can't. I don't know about the rest of the team.
Yeah, it's just breaking up a lot. Just, yeah, gibberish.
Yeah, literally just can't make out anything they're saying.
Okay. So we've got mobile microphones dotted around the table, which clearly are not playing ball then. This is it. 3. That's all we've got.
We can. We can just pass it.
So. That's the way people are talking.
Yeah. So for the online audience, ironically, we have now gone around the room. What I can tell you about the people around the room is they are outstanding with a knowledge of somewhere between 8 and 10 in terms of their supply chain knowledge. And really, they are going to start taking over the session, I think, for me. No, in all seriousness, everyone's introduced themselves. Most people are from within our group and have a knowledge level of somewhere between, I think it's fair to say, between 3 and 6. That's kind of where most people are at. So I think the feedback generally is they have some knowledge in certain areas, but today is obviously to lift their overall knowledge within the supply chain. So if I can ask the guys online, so Mike, I'm going to pick on you because you are first on my screen. If you can just answer those questions that we've got online in terms of your name, department or the company you work for, and your supply chain knowledge, Mike.
Yeah, so my name's Mike. I work in purchasing for a company called Goodflex Rubber Company. I'd probably say I'm around about a 6 because obviously I've done purchasing for a few years, but on supply chain knowledge, that's the next level that I'm moving to. So I'd probably, that's why I'm saying I'm about a 6 because I think I need to get to the next level and understand the transfer over from purchasing to supply chain.
Lovely. Thank you, Mike. Can you hear? Obviously, that's just coming out my laptop. Annie, can we come to you next?
Yeah, hi, I'm Annie. I work for George Baker and James Kemble, and I would say I'm a 3.
Lovely. Okay, thanks, Annie. Mitchell, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. So yeah, I'm Mitchell. I work for Uniserve at the Felixstowe Mega Distribution Centre. I work as a stock and admin manager here, so quite diverse in what we do. I would rate my skills sort of 4 or 5 in supply chain.
Lovely. Thanks, Mitchell. Cosmin?
Hello everyone, my name is Cosmin and I work in the air freight department at the Heathrow office of Uniserve.
I'll say my experience is around 4 or 5, but obviously with the meeting, it'll help me to get more knowledge.
That's the plan, Cosmin. No pressure on me, but yeah, we'll try and do that. Hayley, next to you, and then Amelia afterwards.
Afternoon. Yeah, I'm Hayley. I work at Felixstowe. I'm the stock and admin supervisor. So Mitch is my line manager. So if he's a 4-5, I've got to be a 3-4. I can't go above him.
Lovely. Thanks, Hayley. Amelia, and then Charlie.
Hiya, my name's Amelia, and I work for the CFAST Logistics EU department, and I'd say I'm about a 2.
Okay, lovely, thank you. Charlie, and then Charlotte will be last. Oh, Charlie, we can't hear you. Charlie, you've come off mute, but we can't hear you at the moment. Charlotte, should we jump across to you just while Charlie's sorting out her?
Yeah, of course.
So-
Hi, I'm Charlotte. I work for a company called GT Engine Services, so we repair aircraft engines, and I'm the purchasing manager here. My supply chain knowledge level is probably about a 7 or 8.
Right. Brilliant. Thank you. Charlie, I can see that you've just said that your mic's not working. Can you just tap into the chat? So your role and your mark out of 10 for your supply chain knowledge. Okay, I think Charlie's having some issues. Okay. Well, here we go. So, can you see that? No. So Charlie has a role within the EU department at CFAST, and their knowledge is a 1. Brilliant. Thank you very much, everyone, for just saying hello. I know that's the kind of the embarrassing bit for the day, over and done with. But it's nice to kind of get, for me, to get a level of what your knowledge is of supply chain, and say hopefully at the end of today we'll walk away having a little bit more knowledge. We have a number of other courses. This is going to do my sales spin for Supply Chain Academy. So what I'm going to do today is go through the fundamentals of supply chain, but we'll do deep dives into other subjects as and when is required from departments or from external sources. So what we can do is create bespoke courses for businesses, but what we can also do is take the off-the-shelf courses and run them. And we have a calendar of events that I don't know if they've been publicised just yet. Yeah, they should have been publicised through the group of courses that are coming up over the next 12 months. So feel free to dip into them. We will have half-day courses and we'll have full-day courses available, but we can also do mini sort of 1-hour sessions as well, so 90-minute sessions. Okay, so we're going to move forward now. Any questions from anybody at this point in time? Everyone's okay? Temperature okay? My voice okay? Can't do anything about the accent, I'm afraid. You stuck with that. Okay, so in terms of what we're going to go through today, obviously we started at 2 o'clock today with some welcome introductions. The subjects we're going to dive into before break are around an introduction to supply chain challenges, and some great examples that are out in the world today, a process view of supply chain management. Take a break about 3:30ish for about 15 minutes. So we've got some tea and coffee that will come in. Hopefully I will hit those timelines, and then afterwards we'll have a slightly longer afternoon session, talk about transport and freight, import and export, where we will talk about Incoterms. So might be interesting, Joe, for you. Inventory and warehousing, and then we'll just touch on a little bit around sustainability within our supply chain. Is that okay? And hopefully by the end, or the objective of today's session is to present an overview of the end-to-end supply chain, to provide a refresher of key supply chain concepts and terminology, because you will know some of this stuff. I'm not going to tell you stuff that you don't already know. Elements of it, you'll kind of go, oh yeah, I knew that. Just didn't understand what it was. Or certain bits you'll go, yeah, I know the acronym. I've heard people talk about it in the corridors or whatever. And the third one will be to give an opportunity to think about how various supply chain activities and teams performing them are interconnected. So if you work within the Uniserv group, for example, you'll be focused within your department. It's having an appreciation and understanding of the other departments and what they're doing and why they're doing it. If you don't work for the Uniserv group and you are for an external company, again, it's trying to understand, okay, well, how does my job work with the other departments that are there? Does that department exist? So is it that you are growing as a business and you're trying to learn and understand that you need to have bolt-ons? So is it a case of we don't have a procurement department, we don't have a export department, an import department? Do we need to start thinking about cross-training? Do we need to start thinking about expanding our teams, all that kind of stuff that we'll touch on today? So first of all, I'm going to introduce you to supply chains. And my first question is just simply, what does a supply chain mean for you? What's your definition of a supply chain?
It's a lot of different ways.
Yeah. Anybody else got anything?
Because they can't go online, we just repeat only one thing.
Thank you, Michaela. Yeah, so so Joe just said basically getting an item from A to B is his his definition of supply chain. Anybody else?
Supply goods.
Yeah.
Supply system.
Yeah. I think a lot of it within the definition depends what your role is and depends what your department is as to what you think it is. But ultimately, I mean, Joe was kind of there or thereabouts. So supply chain is the entire system of producing and delivering a product or a service from the very beginning stage of sourcing the raw materials to the final delivery of the product or service to the end user. And depending on what that product or service is, depends on where you are starting and when you are finishing. So is it going into retail? Is it going into wholesale? Is it going into my home? You know, what is it going to do? So when I don't think I have a slide on this, but anybody who knows me knows that I only shop from Amazon. Why do I shop from Amazon? Because it's so blinking easy. And I'm a man, so I'm lazy. So I just want to sit on my setting, just order stuff. So my supply chain, as far as I'm concerned, from ordering items is to go online, place an order on their portal, and then a delivery person will appear and deliver it to my door. That's my element of the supply chain within Amazon I get involved in. But obviously from an Amazon's perspective, you know, it's much wider than that in terms of sourcing, you know, not so raw materials, but finished product to either go to their distribution centers or they're buying suppliers who will send directly to your door. Then they'll have the relationships with the transport and delivery companies, and then eventually the magic happens and it appears on my door next day, which is brilliant. So here is a typical supply chain network, which I'm sure you've seen before, just gives you a bit of an overview. So effectively what you've got is, as an end user customer, so think about that Amazon example I just talked about. So there's me ordering my item from Amazon. It's coming from an Amazon distribution center, probably of some sort, but ultimately there's a vehicle that's brought it into that distribution center. And then the front end bit is it's been made. So if I pick on my Kensington clicker that I'm using today, somewhere somebody has produced that in a factory somewhere, probably in the Far East. And then before then, you've obviously had to go and purchase those raw materials that are required to make that. So whether that's the bits of plastic, it's the buttons, it's the battery, it's the circuitry, whatever it needs to be, that's happened at the front end. So basically we have a process where that is our end-to-end supply chain in a very, very simple way. And ultimately the way that a supply chain will work is there is demand pulling from supply. So it's kind of that push-pull that I'll talk about in a moment. Just a reminder, got any questions that pop up coming through, if you want to challenge me in any way, shape or form, then please do as we go through the session today. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail on this particular slide because it looks a bit complicated, but effectively what we're looking at here is within a supply chain, you have something called push and pull. So some supply chains are pull ones and some ones are simple push ones. So depending on whether you are a customer that is ordering an item and forcing that item to come through. So if you're making a bespoke item, so Jamie wants to make a bespoke car, and he's going to go and find everyone that's going to go and make it for him. I am the customer that's pulling that order through. So somebody's building that deliberately for me. However, if I'm buying an iPhone, then loads of people have got iPhones. So it's not Jamie who's having to pull that through. They're getting pushed through to me because there's millions and millions of those are on the market. So depending on how you're looking to purchase that particular item depends on whether it sits under a pull or a push part of your supply chain. So I think it's important to understand within your business unit, are you more of a push or a pull? So are you actually manufacturing those items within your business already? So Mike, just picking on you online, there's a good chance that you sit between both of these in terms of being push and pull, whereas other businesses you might just simply be a push business.
Yeah, no, definitely push and pull. We are a manufacturing company, so we obviously manufacture products straight from the raw material, but also we buy products in to obviously complement our range. So some of it's push and some of it's pull.
Indeed. Thanks, Mike. And then within your supply chain, you're going to have various different strategies. Again, depending on the role that you have, depending on the department you're in, depends on whether you get to influence these decisions or you just get to implement these types of decisions. But it could be an item that is, there's my bit on this left-hand side, it could be something that's called ETO, which is engineered to order. So that's my car that I want to make that's going to be unique and bespoke to me because I want a bright pink one that's the longest car in the world that flies, with that kind of stuff. But obviously, if I want that, it's going to be a long lead time to create that product because it's unique to me. You can have a make to order. So it's simply something that is being ordered out that is kind of bespoke to me, but more regular people have it, but not too many people have. Then you've got assemble to order, which could be component parts that are coming in that you're going to manufacture, like my little clicker there. And then you've got stuff that is make to stock. And make to stock is literally an item you find on the shelf that you'll go and pick from. So if you think about going into a supermarket, you get supermarket shelves, you always know that there's always going to be cornflakes there. There's always going to be the milks there because it's being made to order, because we know that's going to be ordered. And as you can see from the graph, anything on the left-hand side has that long lead time that I talked about. Anything on the right-hand side, because you know people need it and are going to be ordering it regularly, then that is going to take less time to produce, and it's going to have real value in terms of those people that are ordering that particular product. Now, over the last 10 years, 15 years, we've seen a number of supply chain challenges that have happened in the world today. Just gives you some picture examples that are on the screen, as you can see, which we'll dive into a little bit more detail in a little bit. But any KFC fans in the room? Yeah, like a bit of chicken. Do you remember back in 2018? They ran out of chicken. How does KFC run out of chicken? So obviously they didn't deliberately run out of chicken. What they actually did was they looked at their supply chain and said, we want to be more efficient. We want to try and save some money. How can we go out doing that? So what they actually did was they changed their distribution model. So DHL, they moved their provider from a company called Bidvest to DHL. And DHL basically didn't have the same network as Bidvest. So it only had one distribution center. So what happened is it caused, as you can read on screen, caused a bit of a bottleneck, and they couldn't get the chicken out quick enough because guess what? Everyone loves chicken, and they couldn't supply enough chicken to go out there. So actually half of the 900 stores ran out of chicken.
Was it because KFC didn't clear what they needed, or was it because DHL delivered?
I would say probably the latter, Michaela. So when you're trying to win new business, obviously you always say, we'll do anything you possibly want. But ultimately, I would have thought DHL has said, you need to give us your forecasts. So how much chicken do you actually need? Where do you need it? When do you need it? And then we can run it through our model. Can our distribution center cope with that? Should have been what happened, and they would have gone yes or no. I suspect they just said, yes, we'll win it, and we'll worry about it afterwards. So why did they do it? They did it to save money, but ultimately this cost-cutting maneuver ended up costing the company, brand reputation and potentially a 20% hit on their share price. So just picking up on Michaela's point, if you're going to make a change, make sure you do the research, have that confidence that company can do it, and maybe actually have two partners in play. So while you're cutting across from one to the other, then you've got that supply chain that you know that you can trust. You can start running the other one, and then you can switch it all over as and when you're comfortable with it. Here's another one. 2019, 2020, there was something called COVID-19 that kind of took over the world. Now, for us who work in supply chain, that was kind of really exciting because people then suddenly went, supply chain, that's a really important function with any business. And people started listening to us supply chain professionals and say, actually you do add value to an organization, and all of a sudden supply chain jobs kept appearing in very different places. And a prime example, something that I think pretty much all of us need is toilet paper. And we saw these empty shelves that started appearing within supermarkets, distribution centres, etc., where we could no longer get toilet paper. And the reason for it was, again, was a bottlenecking type situation. So yes, it's produced in overseas, but actually in the UK, we produce our own toilet paper. But because people were concerned, they'd read the news, they'd seen ahead where in Australia and China, they had run out of toilet paper. So the natural reaction is, we must go out and buy all the toilet paper and have it in our homes. And in fact, I always tell the story about my my mother-in-law, who I get on very, very well with. I must put that caveat out there. Every time she went out, she bought four toilet rolls. And we were around at her house the one day when we were allowed to. And the kids went looking in one of the cupboards for something, can't remember what it was. And they found a cupboard full of toilet rolls. And they came running back. Nana, we've just found loads of toilet rolls in your cupboard. And she kind of went, yeah. But she responded in such a way that meant they hadn't found all the toilet rolls. So they then went and got a notepad and pen and went and raided every cupboard and found like 1,000 toilet rolls in the house. So actually, the issue wasn't in the UK that there was a bottleneck of toilet rolls coming from distribution centres out into the supermarkets. It's because my mother-in-law went out and bought the UK stock of toilet rolls. But that's just another example, and you see it all the time. You know, as soon as there's a water shortage or there's an issue that pops up, all the water gets bought, and there's sites and whatever outside supermarkets. A knock-on effect from COVID-19 was that stock was all in the wrong place, and people panicked, and people panic bought, and also people stopped buying. So what happened is we ended up with a load of excess stock. So if you think about, you know, we all worked from home, didn't we? So our working habits changed dramatically. We weren't allowed to go out and buy. We weren't allowed to go and visit places. So naturally, lots of bits of stock started being held up in various different places. So sometimes it was in your own home, sometimes it was in a supermarket, sometimes it was a distribution centre, sometimes it was in warehouses. So it's taken a long time for people then to kind of start getting through all of that. And some of it's perishable items, which they've just had to throw away, which has cost certain industries a whole lot of money. But that's just something to think about. And I think generally businesses have then gone, actually, I need to think about what stock am I holding on a day-to-day basis? Because it's cash that's being held up. And do I really need to hold on to that amount of stock? So it's really helped in terms of forecasting and demand management and all that kind of stuff, which we'll go on to at a later date. Also, there was something called the Ever Given ship that decided to get beached in the Suez Canal. And although this isn't related to COVID-19, similar sort of time, but that just caused massive issues with just effectively the whole world being stopped from getting products kind of coming through. And one of the biggest challenges there was just all the containers. All the containers then got used up because they couldn't go through the Suez Canal, so they just kept filling containers up, and there were no containers available. For those that were working within our group at that time, I'm sure you know a lot about this, but they reckon there was £5 billion worth of trade that was obstructed over the course of 6 days. So some serious challenges that kind of happened. I think kind of moving a little bit further forward, so I will touch on this a couple of times, the Brexit effect, because we're still feeling the issues from the Brexit effect, even though it was 9 years ago. Initially, when we decided to leave Europe, I'm not going to get political in any way, shape or form, but it did happen on my birthday on the 24th of June back in 2016. I woke up in the morning, my wife went, "We're out." And I was like, "Oh no, we're not, are we?" "Yeah, we are." You can tell where I voted. But ultimately, nothing happened, obviously, for the first couple of years. But then things started to change. But the ripples affected businesses where businesses are now gone out of business because their supply chains just don't work anymore. There's the extra paperwork that initially kicked in. There's the extra leverages that have happened. All these types of things that have had a massive effect within supply chains and within UK businesses. And the last one, sort of bring us up to date in terms of 2025. This chap here, again, I'm not going to get political, but he has now decided that he wants to put more taxation on products. And that's had a massive effect with all countries across the world. I get what he's doing, and I'm some ways agree with what he's doing to make sure that, you know, we look after the country that you're kind of working in. So if we can make it, if we can produce it in our own country, we should protect our own country. However, there was no warning. It was just a case of bang, this is happening overnight, and has had, again, massive effects. So people are now renegotiating their trade agreements with places like the US. But again, it's had that knock-on effect. So within the UK, I think our biggest, we are the biggest exporter of Land Rover and Range Rover over to the US. So Land Rover and such have had all these cars sat there going, what are we going to do with this? Do we keep building? Do we stop building? Do we send? Do we not send? A friend of mine who's in the spring business has had a load of springs just sat in customs, not knowing what to do. Can I send them? Can I not send them? So it's just had that, again, that massive ripple effect, which we are still working through. I think as a UK, we're agreeing our trade deals, so we're going to be okay, I think, on the back of it. But other countries are in a bit of a mess because of that. Have we seen an effect on Trump in particular on those trade deals within our organisations? Yeah.
Mastercard, massive steel, but they're open now. Literally on the shores of the water, taxi them. So in that boat, just got to they say good as everything, and yeah, Mastercard has spoken to Sheffield didn't know what to do, so they get removed. That sort of sit there.
For the guys online, did you hear the end of Joe's question there? We did put a microphone under his nose. So Joe was just saying very, very similar in terms of product getting stuck and not knowing what to do with it. And as a group or as an organisation having to help the client to say, this is what we can recommend, this is what we know, and this is how we can kind of help you through that situation. Again, anyone online had similar issues that they'd had?
Yeah, we had one customer that basically the end product was going into America, and the batteries for the vehicle were all coming from China. So basically, they just squashed the project and cancelled all the orders.
That's a good point, Mike. That's the other thing that, again, Mr. Trump wants to know where the product was originally coming from. So in terms of those raw materials or where it was manufactured. So it's not a case of who's just shipping it. So it's shipping from the UK to the US. It's where did it originate from? And then we'll apply the tariffs accordingly to that. So it is having a knock-on effect.
Well, to do that, to tracing those things, and say if he was a car manufacturer, so within that car manufacturers, they might ship in 40% of different components for your vehicle. So we then, as the car manufacturer, you disclose what all of the components come from. I mean, that plausible really is that to do have more information for them to work out but then to come back and say, well, this is the type that we require to need to come into the States.
So one of the beauties of procurement is that you get to go into that sort of detail. So with your quality standards, you need to know where everything has come from. So whether that's the component parts or the manufacturing process, who's been involved in that in terms of labour. So I'm going to go off a slightly different piece, but if you think about slave labour and child labour, and you have internal policies that says we do not agree, we do not do this, you've got to be able to prove that. So if Mr. Tesco's, for example, says, come and work with us, we want to stock your product, but you need to demonstrate this, this, and this. So within your supply chain, you've got to go and knock on each door and say, do you comply? Do you comply? And you need to have some kind of evidence that says yes. So for every component part that you manufacture, there should be that detailed background into it.
Jamie, does that mean if you say you've got a supplier in China, you've got to go and visit China, or how can you monitor, a supplier overseas for that, or how do you get the commitment that there isn't no child labour, slaves?
So, Mike, if you want free holiday to China, then obviously you tell your boss, I must go and visit. You don't physically have to go out there if they can demonstrate that. However, if you are uncomfortable with what they are telling you, then good practice is to go out and see them. Something that I'll touch on a little bit later on is around supplier relationships. And to ensure that you have the best supplier relationships, one thing that is well worthwhile doing is to actually go and see them. I'm a little bit old school, where I like to see the whites of somebody's eyes when I'm talking to them to go, are you telling me the truth or not? So if you can do that, if you can actually go somewhere and they turn around and say, yes, we use the latest machinery. Yes, we we have a plant where we look after our employees, then sometimes you actually have to physically go out and see them to go and do that. Okay, so I've talked a little bit about COVID-19, talked a bit about Brexit. The other thing that is now with us is climate change. And the last section I'm going to talk about today is sustainability. So I won't give all my secrets away at this point in time. But I think what's important to know is that climate change is probably the next biggest thing, or is the biggest thing that's affecting us, even bigger than Trump, and Trump won't like that. You will work in your daily work that you do at this moment in time. You will know there's certain things that you need to do, need to be aware of, and whether that is just doing your basic recycling that you do at home or you do in the office, or it's trying to find new ways in which to use, battery technology versus, the combustion engine, for example. There's lots of different ways in which we're trying to drive down, particularly our net zero carbon targets that we're trying to do, and generally become greener individuals. I don't mean changing skin tone to green, but actually having the ethos within our businesses to work much, much better. And what's the right thing to do for the planet? So that's the next biggest thing that's kind of coming along. And more businesses, more and more customers are demanding that we do that. So they want to know that. And there's some very basic things that we can do within our organisations, as well as one thing Uniserv are doing. We are changing out for electric trucks, for example. Putting solar panels, wind turbines into our facilities, making sure that we've got the latest, best, most efficient systems. Equipment. There's lots of different things that we can kind of do to kind of drive that down. Again, do you see that in your everyday work? So over the last few years, have you seen changes coming into play within the office or within your environments? Yeah.
Working is sustainability, one of the biggest topics at the moment. It's a really interesting topic. You have to go, the some suppliers are really complex.
Yeah.
We have to go through the whole supply chain to work where they are, how they do. Sustainability part of it, so that's also research around green logistics. They have to track every supply chain, what they can really do, how they do that. So that's such a massive expectation of working businesses to have to manage that day out. So the reason, because it makes it good to measure it's good quality and it's done in the right way as well. Just find how the business coming up that, starting back at all.
Especially if you're a brand that's selling yourself on sustainability and the green ethos, and then to be tripped up effectively in one of your components that are not quite as green as what you're perceiving it to be. It could be like 2% worth of the product. That's what you're all in for any business.
So I'm sure the recent one there is one that's applying on manufacturers. It's obviously a child sort of like child labour.
Yep.
Maybe brands got pulled holdings a lot from that.
Yep.
They like supply chain.
Or H&M was today.
So for the guys and girls online, we're just having a bit of discussion about the challenges of proving within your supply chains those green credentials. Sometimes it feels like you're kind of jumping through hoops for the sake of jumping through hoops, but that demand is there. And I think with businesses as well, when you're tendering for projects or tendering for work, there is always a requirement. There is a percentage now about what are you doing from a green standpoint. Now, something that I do is I also work, I've got my own consultancy as well, and I do some work with local councils. And within those local councils, if I'm bidding for tender work, they will say, this piece of work that you're bidding on has got a 15% is towards, green initiatives. So what are you doing? So in the last couple of years, I changed my car. So in an ideal world, they want you to go green. So they want you to go electric. Now we can all debate whether electric cars are truly greener than the combustion engine, but where I live in the middle of nowhere. So moving to a fully electric car was probably not the right thing to do. So I went down the hybrid route. So it cost me an awful lot of money to get this hybrid car, which wasn't necessarily what I wanted, but it ticked boxes. Actually, I love the car, so it's really nice. But it's something I needed to do. Something else we do is we also then invest in green projects. So we, for X amount of hours of support that we deliver out, we plant a tree, which is a very simple system. So for every 10 hours of support we do, we plant a tree, which costs us $1. So that's the way that we're sort of giving back. But you can also say, where do you want that tree to go? And can you prove that tree? So we choose, if we're delivering support in my local area, which is Worcestershire, so we've nominated Worcestershire as our area, that's where they're going to be planted, and I can actually go out and go, I picked that tree. Probably didn't, but that's where you're going to look to put that money into. So I'm sure Ian has got a number of different projects that he's involved in, that he is investing in on behalf of our group. Hannah.
Question from Alice in the chat.
Yes.
She just raised that.
Annie, do you want to ask your question?
Oh yeah, it was just to contribute to the conversation. I think you've covered it, but I was looking at it from a commercial marketing comms angle, by which margins are so small now when I speak to customers and suppliers, that really now their competitive advantage is ESG, of which climate change falls under. So it's just to add that during like a bid process, if you're in manufacturing or you're a tier 2 supplying a tier 1, much to the point that you're making, that you need to prove through accreditations that you're doing XYZ, because that's part of a bid package. Because, like as aforementioned, that they can't compete now on price.
Absolutely, thank you, Annie. And Annie, interesting, raised a good acronym there, ESG. Has everyone heard of ESG? Environmental Social Governance. So environmental social governance and CSR. There isn't going to be a test at the end of this session, so don't worry, you don't need to memorize this. Thank you, Michaela. CSR, corporate social responsibility, are an internal and effectively an internal and external measurement. So CSR is the internal measurement that basically, sorry, get it right. CSR is your external measurement in terms of how the organisation is performing, and they'll look at things beyond green. So what are you doing from a social perspective to say, how are you looking after your employees? So in terms of their work contracts, in terms of their providing lunch for them, providing them a rest room, all that kind of stuff. What are you doing for the local community? So if you're building a brand new building near a residential development, then are you investing in the local infrastructure? Are you sponsoring the local football team? You know, what are you doing? So it's all about making sure that you're investing back in to those individuals, those employees, and the local community. Again, we'll touch on sustainability at the end because it's really a really interesting subject moving forward. Okay, that's into module 1. Any other questions about module 1? So it's kind of giving you a bit of a background, a bit of a framework to it. Guys online, any questions, or are you comfortable and happy to kind of move into module 2?
Good.
Okay, fabulous. So let's talk about, so we've talked about supply chains. This is around supply chain management. So what do we mean by the term supply chain management? So what's the difference between the two? So what do you think supply chain management means? What's the definition?
Yes, it's looking at efficiency in getting product from B to B.
Yeah. So for those online, so Joe's just said about the efficiency of getting stuff from A to B. Any other suggestions? I'm not saying that's wrong, James. Let's jump in. So the official bit is supply chain management is the management of a network that is used to deliver products and services from the raw material to the customer through physical distribution, flow of information, and cash. So it's the bits of software, it's the bits of process, it's the bits of machinery used to go through that process, which is supply chain management. So you're managing your supply chain. So those focus points then in supply chain management, in general, supply chains can be difficult to balance because it involves complex network of facilities and products. So your supply chain could be very, very simple. So the supply chain for me to use an example from home, we had a roast dinner on Sunday because we had some family around. And my wife sort of green fingered, but not really green fingered, but she's growing some runner beans. So, we can have runner beans as our vegetable that's going to go on our table. So what was our supply chain? She went outside, she picked the runner beans, brought them back, my daughter chopped them up, cooked them, bang, on the table, happy days. Well, actually, there was a bit of a supply chain before that because we had to buy the seeds from somewhere, I don't know where, plant them, and away we go. But it was a very, very simple bit. But you guys who work for Uniserve, you are middlemen and women who are helping support clients to ship stuff from A to B, go through their paperwork, do whatever they need to do. So chances are they've got quite a complex element, and they're dealing with lots of partners to get whatever their product is from A to B, importing, exporting, etc. So depending on your business, your organization, or what you do, depends on how complicated it is or how complex you want to make it. But try and keep it as simple as possible. So it's also its overall behavior is hard to predict as a result of dynamic variations and supply chain demand, seasonality, randomness. Brilliant. Covers anything, that. Carte blanche. So randomness covers COVID-19. Randomness covers Donald Trump. It covers lots of different things. Basically, certain things can't be predicted, particularly if it's a geopolitical issue, if it's an environmental issue that's kind of going on, can be a real challenge. So I've worked with so when the Ukraine and the Russian war kicked off, I was working with a particular client, and we were having a meeting, we're having an online meeting, and you know when you're talking to somebody, when somebody is actually paying attention and people aren't paying attention, and this guy was distracted to the point where I kind of went, is everything okay? Because you're not, in the nicest possible way, you're not listening to me. And he kind of went, no, we've got a problem. What's your problem? So they were sourcing paper, and their paper was coming from Russia. But don't worry, they've got a fallback situation. The fallback is Ukraine. So the guy was saying, so we've now got to exit out of Russia. I can't really deal with Ukraine. We've got an opportunity in Greece. So the guy was trying to talk to me whilst having a conversation with somebody else about what's it's hit the fan, we need to deal with this kind of now. So it was a case of, right, let's end this call. This is not adding value to your current challenge, your current randomness. Go and sort that out. So things will pop up all the time that you kind of not expecting. And it also can be difficult to coordinate due to conflicting interests of its partners. So your partners within your supply chain can cause you headaches. So are they telling you the truth? So go back to Bidvest and DHL. Yeah, we can do that. We can get all your chicken in there, no problem at all. Can you though? Now I'm a control freak. So whenever my kids or my wife says something, I always go, yeah, but really, can you? So in supply chain, you can be a control freak, but you can also put mechanisms and measurements in place to make sure that people are hitting your targets. That makes sense? Yeah. So I've worked in ops and supply chain sort of all my life. So my arch enemy is always Mr. Salesman, because Mr. Salesman says, I can do it all. I can deliver, or my team will deliver this for you. It'll do it tomorrow. We'll do it at half the price. So there's always this battle that's going on between operations and sales. Look, you will see it all the time. Your sales guys are out on the road who are promising the world to your kind of customers. So in supply chain world, we're always doing this balance. So it's cost and service, and there's money involved in both of it. So yeah, I can do it. I can drop everything and deliver that for you. However, it's going to cost money. And it means I'm going to have to stop doing the other things that I'm kind of doing. So in our world, in supply chain management, in operations management, we're always trying to work out what this balance is going to be. So when you think about if you're importing goods, say from the Far East, and our sales guy is turned around and says, yeah, we'll have that tomorrow, we'll have that next week. Then yeah, we can get it, but we're going to have to fly it. Now, we all know that flying is very, very expensive. Stick it on the ocean and bring it in, it's a lot cheaper. But it will take time. So if you're needing it, so you need those winter coats, guess what? For the winter, or you need those Christmas presents for Christmas, then you've got to factor that in and bring those lead times right forward. But if you've run out of something and it's a case of I need it now, then you may have to buy it and it may cost you money. But all the time, we're sat there looking at that balance going, what's the right thing to do? And I'm sure you've probably gone through those scenarios where somebody's come to you and said, I need it now. Fine. This is what will happen as a result of that. Does that sound familiar in your organizations? Do people come and ask you that? Customers ask you that? Your boss says that to you?
Yeah.
Mike says yes. He's obviously hearing that a lot.
Every day.
I think
all the time here too.
Yeah. Yeah, particularly with customers. Customers are requesting that all the time. But then that's what you expect. As a customer, I always want things now. Get it to me now. If you don't ask, you don't get. So something else that we're considering within supply chain management is something called S&OP. So sales and operations planning. So things that we've got to bring into the equation to say, okay, so when we're making our decisions with sales or with operations, what factors do we need to consider? What are the bits that we need to consider coming in? So in no particular order, see this top right-hand corner here is distribution and marketing. So what is the customer's need? What's the demand forecast? And what's the competition behavior? So we are monitoring and hopefully staying one step ahead of the curve if we can. So we're managing that trend of what's coming through. So I've got two young kids. No, I've got a younger child and an older child now, actually. And you know, they want the latest and the greatest things, and they're always trying to stay one step ahead. Fast fashion, you know, they're into fast fashion. All that. So you're constantly having to manage that demand against, with fast fashion in particular, around your ethics, your values as an individual. Do I like that? Do I not like that? I was on holiday last week in Valencia, and I got dragged into, where did I get? Primark. Oh, God almighty. And there's no seats for men to sit on in Primark, which is really annoying. If they had a little couch area, it would be brilliant, but they haven't got. So I get dragged around, and my wife's like, do you not want to look at things? Like, no, not interested at all. So for me, this doesn't meet my customer need. I'm not interested in fast fashion. Finance, as I've mentioned, everything costs money. So are we making sure that we are delivering whatever it is at the lowest possible price? And when it comes to finance, are we investing in, I don't know, a new piece of kit that we need to manufacture that part that we're going to bring through our business? So what are we going to invest in? How is our cash flow in our business? The prices have gone up in terms of like national insurance from the government and things like that. So there's always lots of things, you know, electricity prices to consider. Human resources, what's going on in the labour market at this moment in time? So interestingly, there is a lack of supply chain professionals out in the marketplace. So for anybody who works within our group, I am not suggesting go and leave Uniserv and go and work for somebody else. What I'm suggesting is stay within Uniserv, get trained up by ourselves in the Supply Chain Academy, because there is an absolute demand for good quality supply chain professionals. And those that are within an organisation will get looked after. So I strongly recommend upskilling yourselves within supply chain, because it's an area where you can make a massive difference to businesses. Engineering, constantly you're thinking about staying one step ahead of the curve. What products are people looking for? What can I invent? You know, the old iPhone, for those that are old enough to know pre-iPhone days, when this thing came out, everyone kind of went, whoa, what the hell's that all about? Lots of people kind of went, well, that's not going to work. You know, my Nokia 3310 that I've got here, you know, I can throw it against the wall. The battery lasts for a year, all that kind of stuff. I want to keep all of that. However, when you come to read a text message and you only get one line at a time, and it takes you a long time to read a text message, it becomes very difficult. So this thing came out and it just changed the world. So what are the latest trends that are coming out? What's next that's coming down the line? Materials. So think about the materials. So do we need to change the materials that we're using? So I mentioned clearly this is going to be, I'll talk about a green thread that's going to run through today, which is sustainability. We're constantly looking at how do we make our products lighter, cheaper, more robust, all that kind of stuff. So what sort of things do we need to think about? And what are the new materials that are being created all the time? So roll back sort of 5 years, 10 years, 3D printing came onto the market. So that was going to just change everything. Every home is going to have a 3D printer. Who's got a 3D printer in their home? Anybody? No. But everyone's going to have a 3D printer. Yeah, we haven't got one. My daughter had a little dabble with a little, like a hot glue gun, and she makes awful things with it. And you go, oh, it looks beautiful. In businesses, yes, 3D printing is there. You know, you can print a house out of concrete, all that kind of stuff. But it isn't in every single industry moving forward. And then lastly, look at operations. So what are our capacities? What are our future capacities? What do our staffing levels need to be? So all of these areas around the outside of our circle in the middle are things to consider when we're doing our sales ops planning. It is critical within our supply chains. So when your boss comes to you, when a customer comes to you and says, how are you going to save me money? These are all the areas you're going to be looking at to improve your ops and your sales. There is, I'm not going to go into this too much detail. There is a model that sits, called the SCORE model. With any industry, with any business you're in, there'll be best practice. There will be levels that you're trying to achieve. There'll be metrics that are within within an industry that you're trying to see what is good and what is bad. Within your organisation, depending on the systems and the processes you've got and the people that you've got, resources you've got available, you constantly want to be trying to drive either up or drive down cost and improve performance. So you will have metrics of some sort, KPIs within your business that you're kind of working with. You want to be constantly monitoring what does good look like and what does even better look like. A score model is just one way we can kind of go about it, but I won't go into it in too much detail because there's lots of component parts that kind of sit within there. That brings us to the end of module 2. So around supply chain management itself. Again, just top level, I'm not going into too much detail. Any questions? Are you still with me? Yeah, definitely. How are we doing for temperature in this room? All right, okay. Online crowd, are we okay over there?
Just one quick question.
Yes.
So to summarize the slide before last, would you say that sales and ops are the central components of supply chain management? That's what that diagram's saying.
Correct. The sales,
right? Okay.
Sales in somewhat is the driver behind it, because obviously
that's
why you're ordering, because of those sales. And the operations planning bit is the bit to bring it in the most cost efficient way possible, cost effective way and time way.
Cool. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Annie. Okay. So the next 20 minutes, we're going to talk about the view of the supply chain. And then we'll take a break at 3:30. So you've only got 20 minutes to go, then coffee is coming. Talking of coffee, it's like I wrote this presentation, wasn't it? Are we all coffee drinkers in the room? Tea drinkers? Hot drinkers? So when you go to whatever your preference is, Starbucks, Costa, Pret, the kitchen in there, wherever, but mainly those bigger chains that pick on Starbucks. Starbucks, there is a massive chain within getting those coffee beans from wherever they are to having that simple cup of coffee that you have. Anybody guess how many partners are involved in bringing your cup of coffee to you, or you ordering a cup of coffee and getting it from Starbucks? 100. Good guess, Paul. Any other guesses? 20. Good one, right? Any others? I will give you the answer, don't worry. And there's no prize.
200.
200, good shout. It's 29. So, Loretta, you weren't far off from Mark. I'll make you a coffee doing it. 3:30. So 29 partners across 18 countries have got to collaborate together to make one simple, humble cup of coffee, which is just amazing. It's brilliant. But they've got to be working in harmony, working in sync to make sure that kind of arrives, isn't it? If you think about, McDonald's is the prime example. If you want a Big Mac, you know what a Big Mac is like in the UK. But equally, if you go to Spain, you go to America, you go to China, wherever, that Big Mac is going to look exactly the same. So they've got to make sure they've got that consistency across the board. So it's not just a case of, well, there's the picture, make it look like the picture. If I go home and try and make it look like the picture, well, first of all, I won't, but the taste will be completely different. So having that consistency is really important. Same applies to the coffee and how you make the coffee. So in terms of our supply chain planning, obviously the execution within there is critical. Now, this guy over here was fundamentally trying to create this military plan for the US in terms of the D-Day landings in the Second World War. So if you think about how we wanted to make sure that the Germans didn't come in, getting political again, aren't I? Any Germans in the room? Making sure that the Germans didn't come to the UK and take over, is we put together we organised the D-Day landings with the US, with the French, to support us, to make sure that we secured, and we got, I forget what it was, 200 odd boats or whatever it was coming across the channel to make sure that we kept at bay and took over northern France. That took a lot of planning, a hell of a lot of planning over a number of months. It wasn't a case of back of the fag packet, bang, we'll get it done. Took a lot of time and planning to kind of do that. And that just goes to show whatever type of exercise you're trying to do, put that planning behind whatever it needs to be and put the right amount of time into it. And within us, if we go back into our world, as opposed to war times, in terms of supply chain planning process, the main supply chain processes should include the following: demand planning, supply planning, sales ops planning, which we've talked about at length on the previous section, production planning, and MRP, which is materials requirements planning, which we're going to just jump into a little bit more detail there. But I talked about that planning, and there's something called the planning triangle, which shows effectively the elements that sit behind whatever you're trying to do. So whether that is, because I'm a sad person, I'm an operations person, when it comes to holiday planning, I kind of go into this a little bit, drives my wife bananas. But if I'm going to go somewhere, I want to maximize the opportunity of that country I'm going to, or that town I'm going to, whatever. What am I going to do? Where's the itinerary? How much is it going to cost? All that kind of stuff. I'm great fun to live with. That said, I had a fundamental failure on my holiday, which I was telling Michaela about just a little bit earlier. So I went to Spain, went to Valencia last week. So obviously I found the location we're going to. I found the villa we're staying in. I sorted the car out. I got the insurance sorted. Bang, 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 bang. Happy days. And then my fatal flaw was that I chose Ryanair as my airline of choice to fly with. Why? Because they were cheap. The flight times ticked the boxes I was looking for. So I thought, brilliant. But we got on there straight away. Yet there's a delay. Your plane is somewhere else. Then it arrived. Then we missed our slot to take off. So we sat in the plane for ages. Then we arrived. We haven't got anywhere to go to. The net result was that we were over 3 hours late, or we were 3 hours late landing to therefore go and get my car. So I went to the desk, the car hire place. I'm here. Here's my details. I printed them all off. There's my details. Bang, I want my car. And the guy went, got a problem. What's the problem? We've given your car away. What do you mean you've given my car? I paid for it and the extra insurance. He said, terms and conditions are, if you've not informed us and it's over 3 hours, we give your car away. Now, I don't know whether that's BS, and I'm in the process of trying to sort that out. But fundamentally, my planning went out the window a little bit, but it was outside of my control. So is what, sorry, Joe? Randomness, exactly right. So I'm following up that randomness to see whether it is randomness or whether I've got a case to fight. So yeah, really frustrating, and it had a knock-on effect. But anyway, that's me trying to sort it out. So anyway, let's go back to what we were talking about, which is the planning triangle. So depending on your business, typically you will start at the top. You will have a strategic plan. So Ian will have a strategic plan for all of his businesses. This is what we're going to do. This is the 5-year plan, and it'll be very, very top level. So it may be a case of we're going to make £1 billion in 5 years' time. Don't know what it's going to be. Don't quote me on that, by the way, back to Ian. But then you're going to come up with your S&OP plan. So your sales and operational plan. That's going to be between 2 years and 18 months. So you're going to go into a bit more detail, but not granular, but top line sort of detail. Then you'll drop it down into what we call tactical planning, which will be 1 to 3 months. So what is going to happen in that time? A little bit more detail. And then finally at the bottom, that's operational planning. That is what exactly, who is going to do, when they're going to do it, all that kind of stuff. Real detail type stuff. Now, depending on your organization, depending on what you're buying, you're selling, you're moving, depends on how much detail sits in there, how many people are involved in this process. But ultimately, there is a plan. We have a plan to do what we're going to do. But as Joe says, we should have is a factor over here that says randomness might come and scupper our plans. But there's a plan within there. I won't go into too much detail, but this just breaks it down to a bit more detail. So in terms of our operational side of things, so we're looking at things like production scheduling. So what is it we're actually processing today? What's happening within our shop floor? What's coming in and out of our building or in and out of our departments? In terms of tactical, this is more around forecasting, demand management. You can see here, scheduling for the future, looking at our capacity, how much can we actually put through today and in the future, and then strategically, more of the longer term things. So it's more around, could be a revenue number, could be a number of widgets per hour we're looking to do. Recruitment could be around financial and resource planning, new machinery we're going to be buying. So again, have a think about your organisation and how that looks. So is there a cunning plan? Does your boss have a cunning plan? Are you aware of that cunning plan? Are you delivering on that cunning plan? That makes sense. Yeah, it's logical, it's straightforward, it's common sense. However, so many people don't do it. They have what they call a hope strategy. So I hope to get there on time. I hope that order comes in. I hope my car is there. All that kind of stuff. So demand planning, I'm sure you've all heard of demand planning. And it's very simply, within your organisation, you will have somebody, hopefully, who is looking at demand and what is demand looking like. So any supply chain planning process will start with demands. So it's a team consisting of people from sales, marketing, supply chain, creating a sales forecast based on historical data and other information, such as arriving from point of sale terminals. So there's data that's coming in that's making you want to place that demand order. So I know this time last year, because it's a seasonal product, I sold 1,000 of them. So what do we think the weather's going to be like this year? Is it going to be 1,000? Did I run out last year? So if I put an extra 20% in, I could have sold 1,200 last year. And what you're also doing is then analysing that data. So the team over here, you're doing a lot of data analysis, I'm sure. And it's interesting, people either love data or hate data. I'm sad, I like data. My wife hates data. So when it comes to looking at bank accounts or anything like that, I'm on it. I've got a spreadsheet for that. And she's just like, just tell me, is it good or is it bad? But you know, you've got to find the right people within your business who will do things like demand planning. Really, really important. But use your systems, your internal systems that you have to provide that data. So that's demand, but we've also got forecasting. So how many people do the old, I think we're going to do this. I think we're going to do that. I think the weather's going to be like this. When it comes to forecasting, you are never right. You're never 100% right, but you could get close to it. So when I drive home tonight, I'll get in the car, I'll phone my wife, she'll go, how was your day? And I'll go, brilliant. I had the best group ever this afternoon. And she'll go, what time are you home? And I'll go, I forecast that I'll be home in X amount of hours time. Don't know whether it's going to be right. Don't know what the M25 is going to do. But it's the best guess. So in terms of those forecasts, they are never accurate. Do not beat yourself up on any forecast. Short-term forecasts are often better than long-term forecasts for obvious reasons. I'm looking this far ahead as opposed to this far ahead. So generally, you've got a better idea about that. Aggregate forecasts are better than a single item forecast. So have a look at it maybe as a family of products, as a large organisation, or looking at it as an average of that longer-term supply chain you're looking at. A good forecast also delivers some measures of error. And the important thing is, if you're not 100% accurate, which you won't be, understand why you're not accurate and whether you're over or under. What sort of things did you not take into consideration that maybe you should have taken into consideration? And a forecasting technique should not be used to the exclusion of known information. So if the data is telling you one thing, don't ignore it. It's telling you something for a reason, because that's historical information. So bring that into the equation. That said, I'm going to contradict myself and go with a gut check. What does the gut tell you? So the data tells me this, but do I really want to do that? Because my gut tells me that that latest trend is going to go out of fashion next year. And we're not going to do that. And the last one there, in real life business, forecasting is just one element of that demand planning process. So when we develop forecasts or when we use them, we need to be fully aware of these principles and their implications. Now, I may have missed something off there, but generally they're the 6 you're kind of playing with when it comes to the principles of forecasting. Any questions on that? How are we doing online? We all still there? Still got our cups of tea going? Any questions?
No.
Good. Okay. Yeah, forecast versus planning. You know, what's the difference between the two? I think I've kind of gone through that in terms of the forecasting. Is that finger in the air? We think we know where we are. So the forecast is a prediction of future events using a means other than simply by making a guess. A plan, on the other hand, is an articulation of how a company intends to respond to a forecast. And a plan is typically a diagram of steps. So we create our forecast and then we go, and now we have our plan. So based on our best guess of information, there's our kind of plan moving forward. And hopefully that will be there to achieve whatever our objective is going to be. So that forecasting is everywhere within our supply chains. So whether it's within materials, so who do we buy from? How much? Where are we going to get it from? Production, we're producing the right amount. Distribution. So if our business is growing rapidly, our distribution may change. So don't think, well, we'll do the same thing as we did last year. Go back to our chicken bit earlier. So they made a fundamental change that went wrong. So must think what we're going to do there. When it comes to retail is so fickle. Throw in COVID-19. No one predicted COVID-19 coming. So guess what? All those shops had to shut their doors. And then the sat on all that stock. What we're going to do with stock? Can we become a business where we're an essential business? People must come to us. I was talking to a client who was he was behind the Nightingale hospitals, so he was the strategist behind them, and then he was part of the management team to kind of then build them. And they got to a point where they kind of like, we've run out of whatevers. Well, where'd you get those whatevers from? B&Q. But B&Q shut. You can't go there. So he went along and knocked on the door of Boris Johnson and said, we need you to open all the DIY stores so we can get all our items through. So the DIY stores then were able to open as a net result of him asking for support with the Nightingale hospitals. But rather than just doing it for Nightingales, they got priority. Everybody else could then access DIY. So you were able to go down there and make sure you looked at chairs, because it was beautiful summer that summer that we were on. Also analysing customer demand. So interestingly, if we're a supplier, for a supplier business, probably our customers know us better than we know them, and vice versa. So within your supply chain, you're constantly having those communications within your partners, your collaborators. You're with saying, what's going to happen? So tell me where you think your forecasts are going to be for this year. So what you're doing about sales, about introducing new product. Can we help you on that particular journey? So making sure you bring them into the equation is really important. So forecasting is everywhere. Again, if you have online shopping at home, you're kind of putting your order in there and you're kind of guessing, is it going to be warm this week? Do I need to order ice cream or not? What we're going to have for dinner? You'll do that forecasting elements to it. I'm going to skip through a couple of these because we've gone through this already. Production planning. Production planning addresses the details of manufacturing products, including the number of types of products and their components, who will make them, and which plants and machinery are involved. So you could be a business that's a global business that has multiple plants around the world, sorry. And you need to be constantly planning to say, well, where are we going to do what, where, and how? So if there's a geopolitical issue in a particular country, so let's just say there's been an earthquake in, I'm going to pick on Singapore, don't know why, that there's been an issue in Singapore. Actually, we've got a factory out there. So anything that's going on there will be affected by that earthquake potentially. So we may need to reroute production somewhere else. So constantly looking at what's going on. If you are a single sourced supplier, so all of your component parts come from, or raw materials come from one supplier, and there is an issue with that supplier, you could have massive problems. So can you find another supplier very quickly who can pick up the slack that you're not going to get? Or do you have multiple suppliers that are kind of working? So I think it's to consider there is always around your resource, which includes your employees, materials, and also your production capacity when you're doing your production planning. So Mike, I'm just going to pick on you just because I know your business a little bit better. So constantly you will be looking at your capacity. You will know your planning availability through your building. And in theory, you know what your customers are wanting. So you're constantly, I'm guessing, reviewing, tweaking, changing, bringing in, moving people around to make sure they're getting the outputs done.
Yeah, exactly that. Problem that we have though is the lead times, a bit like you was touching on earlier with the forecast. They're never accurate. So we put into our system a flow on the lead time from the supplier and basically what the customer's going to want. But like you said, it never works out exact.
Yeah. Thank you, Mike. Something else to consider. Have you heard the phrase MRP? No. Okay. So MRP, materials requirement planning. You can see on the right-hand side, these are just different raw materials, different parts that are coming in from around the country. Love the fact that you've got from coal to a rubber ducky. So material requirements planning is a method for calculating and planning raw materials and components needed to manufacture the products called for in demand and production plan. So it's not a case of I can just go out locally and just source my materials. They are all over the world. So if you think about how many elements that sit within your mobile phone and where are they all produced? So the raw materials are from multiple sources. They may be all brought together in one particular location, and that could be, I guess, guessing in the Far East again, but being sold through the UK. But all these different components are being sourced and then coming to a single location and then shipped across to the UK. So what you've got to make sure is you're constantly managing things like your inventory of materials, those components, and the MRP's role in the supply chain is critical as it affects the supplies coming in from manufacturer and leaving it in the form of products continuing along the chain of distributors, retailers, and ultimately to the consumers. So your MRP is managing that process. It's a system to manage the process of all the different elements you need to make that finished goods. In terms of procurement, so the process of finding a product or service, agreeing to terms, and then acquiring it is known as procurement. So it is the sourcing and the buying of particular items. I won't go through this in full detail, but there is your procurement cycle in terms of defining what you need and then ultimately managing it kind of through. Not sure if we are providing the full deck of slides, but we will certainly can do an abbreviated slide deck you can take away. So you can have magical things like this, which you can read when you go to bed at night to put you to sleep. Quite simply, the 5 rights of procurement, making sure you have the right quality and the right quantity at the right price, in the right place and the right time. You will do that on a daily basis anyway. If you're going to go and buy something, you'll think, I need to go and buy a whatever. You'll go to the shelf. Does it tick all those boxes? Yes, no, I'll buy it or I won't buy it. Exactly the same within business. In procurement, that's what you're going to think about when you're buying that particular item. Now, it may not be the best quality, but they can do it at the right time, at the right price for you. So you're kind of weighing that up all the time. And in terms of those benefits of having an effective procurement process, number one, it's all around the cost savings. Making sure you've got nice improved relationships with suppliers, having good efficiency, having a reduced risk and access to exclusive deals and innovation products. So it may be a case of that you have an agreement with a supplier that they are only going to work with you, or you flip it the other way and say, I'm only going to have this product being manufactured by you and by nobody else. It is 3:30. Coffee is coming, although I can't hear Aaron rattling anything yet, so we might have to go and get it ourselves. Just got a couple more slides that I'm going to run through if that's okay with everybody. So just in terms of production, 4 different types of production. You have something called a job-based production, which is a great example is buying a house or building a house. So I'm building something from start to finish that is a bespoke kind of one-off type thing like a house. 2 is around batch production. So it is not mass production, which is your phone that millions and millions of people want. It's something like a jet engine. Now, I don't have a jet at home, therefore I don't need a jet engine. There is only a limited customer base to having things like that. So that is built through batch production. And then other things are things like flow production that just happen all the time. So this is the oil and gas industry. So it's like your electricity that you're having all the time. So in essence, always consider what's going on in your inventory. So your business will succeed or fail by the amount of stock that you're holding. So you've got to be holding that balance. That balance we talked about before is how much or how much not to have in terms of that cash flow. But people won't buy from you if you haven't got it. So if the customer's expectation is that you should always have it in stock, you should always have it in stock. back in my very, very early days at Sainsbury's, just a little story for you. I was promoted to the bakery department, and I had to look after bread. And part of it was ordering bread. So I had to do these bread books. And these bread books were like this big, and you open them out, and you literally had to write down, it shows how old I am, write down how much bread you want to order. And I was trying to do this balance because I'm fed up with having to produce it and give it away at the end of the day. So we've got to get this balance kind of right. Now, one Saturday, I didn't get the balance right, and I ran out of bread. So it was like by 12 o'clock on a Saturday, there's no bread. So my store manager is kind of going, what's going on here? One thing you never run out of, or two things you never run out of in the supermarket is bread and milk. They are the two things. So I got my ass kicked from left to right. And guess what? I never ran out of bread ever again. But really, really important lesson I learned. So consider your inventory, make sure you get it right. And the last one, slide on here, was, I've touched on this a little bit already, is just around supplier relationships. You are, in some ways, it's only as good as your relationship you have with your supplier. If you have a really strong, good, open, communicative relationship with your supplier, they will work really well with you. They'll become a partner, a collaborator with you. If you have a poor relationship, if there's a problem, then they probably won't help you, or they'll be very limited to help you, or they will hold you to ransom. So during COVID-19, as I mentioned earlier, lots of the challenges that happened in the world, lots of businesses went under because their supplier relationships were poor. So when a supplier turned around and said, right, we need to change payment terms because I need cash, lots of businesses went, well, I'm not prepared to do that. Okay, well, we can't work with you. Or that supplier went under. So it's really, really important. Whoever you work with, whether that's internally or externally, is maximize those relationships, have really good relationships with those people, get to know the people, communicate, hit their numbers. Really, really important to make sure that your supply chain is strong, is strengthened. And again, I do a workshop on service level agreements specifically around managing your customers and your suppliers. That's the end of that module. Just before we break for coffee, any questions? Okay, any questions online? Are we all okay?
Oh, good.
Okay, right, we'll break now. We'll call it 3:35. So if we come back in 15 minutes, so we come back at 10:02, if that's okay. I'll leave the presentation on and the Teams link up.
Okay.
So. Your attention, but not just. Yeah.
We got some decisions on.
You've got Susie perfect at times, very inefficient. Yeah, so obviously the heated takes, break and mold it and everything, and then obviously transport it. Yeah, it's not that effective with plastic, you can reuse it effortlessly over and over again. Yeah, so there's always, when people say glass is expensive, turning on the paint, again, you can't mix the green with the brown, so it's
frustrating. So as you say, 10 times perfect.
Yeah.
Realistically, does it go through time?
No, is that what you drop it, chip it, just but only accidentally you try to, but point out that. So you get after 4 uses or whatever, you got to melt it back down and then you're -6 behind at the time.
It has to be harder. So on. What did you do that? Well,
You're right with that extension lead, by the way. Oh, it's not getting in your way, is it?
No, no. All right.
You didn't get
We're happy to restart, folks. To our online community, we're going to restart if you're all ready. Again,
Yep,
hopefully
all good.
you've charged your glasses and ready to go again for the second part. So we're going to move on to module 4, which is around transport and freight. So as you can see through the presentation I'm going through today, we're kind of going through a supply chain from, guess what, from start to finish. So the next logical place is to look at transport and freight, which covers off a fair bit of topic. So first of all, question for you. So if you thought you were going to get it easy this afternoon by just cruising through the next couple of hours, no, I do have questions still to throw at you. What do you think are the 3 main modes of transport getting an item from A to B? Not a trick question.
Air, sea and road.
Yes. Any others you want to throw in there?
Rail.
Yeah. So the question is the 3 main ones, and not surprisingly, ocean, air, and road. But yes, you can throw rail into the mix. It is number 4. Again, I was sad last week when I was in Valencia. We were outside the the food market,
Yeah.
the main big food market thing. Yeah. So I'm outside, and this guy comes along on his cargo bike, so electric cargo bike, but it's one of these ones where you can properly do this, and he's got big cargo on the back end. So I was sad. I took a picture of it. I was like, that's really cool. I like that. So that's kind of like last mile delivery, which doesn't kind of appear sort of on here as a bike, but that could be a 5th, it could be a 6th, something along those lines. But they're the three main modes of transport. Typically, when you're bringing something in from overseas, these are the routes that you're going to kind of use. And the main parties that you're going to be involved. Sorry, question. What are the main parties that are involved in those shipments? So what are the 3 elements that you're going to use? You may use.
Signing. Customs. Sign up.
Yeah. So if you go up a level, so that's going to the detail, Joe, which is what I would expect from you. But going at a higher level, you're going to be thinking about, sorry, I jumped ahead. The exporter, the importer, and the third party. So Joe, what you just talked about sits nicely in that third party section. But the 2 main ones there are going to be the importer and the exporter. So in terms of what's the importer typically starts the chain. They're the person that says, I want to bring in this particular item. So I want to bring in my clicker, whatever. And that's the person that basically will trigger the mechanism to start bringing stuff in. So there's a good chance that within the Uniserv group, these are the guys that you're kind of dealing with, which is the customer, the importer, that says, can you help me do this? So the importer effectively starts the international movement within the forwarding process, but they may choose to use other people who will help them along the line. So the importer is often known as the consignee or the buyer. And the importer's main concerns is to receive the goods intact and undamaged into their inventory in a time frame that suits their business. It's quite simple. If you pay for the goods, you kind of want to hear on get them all done. And then the exporter, so throwing it the other way, the exporter is the person that's going to help you bring it in. So the exporter is generally the one that's selling the goods to an overseas customer, and are often also known as the consignor, the shipper, the supplier, the seller. So the exporter's role is to ensure that the product is packed safely, marked clearly for the international journey, and additionally they need to make sure that the goods pass through the appropriate forwarder in the agreed time frame. And then our third parties, who are also going to help us along the road, are the logistics companies, so the trucker, the haulier, carrier, which could be the airline, it could be the shipping line, an operator that may be helping us on the road or the rail. Those horrible things called customs, because they just charge money all the time. Taxation, our overseas agent, who might help us from a freight forwarding point of view to forward something from the overseas country, and then something called a notifying party. So as we're moving our goods, particularly let's talk about from the US or from the Far East, there's a number of parties that need to be involved in that. And the critical thing, which we'll come on to shortly, is the paperwork and making sure the paperwork is, you tick all of those boxes. Now, if you don't know how to do that, guess what? I know a man who can help you in that journey, and that's Uniserv. So if you're not sure what you need to do, then go and partner with somebody who can help you on that journey. Yes, you can move them in. quite happily yourselves, but if you don't know the process, and if you don't make sure that you tick all those boxes, you know, pay your customs, etc., then you will be in a bit of bother. So Joe's favourite subject, Incoterms. Joe, what are Incoterms?
It's when the liability lands. That's my understanding of it, yeah.
So we also have a separate workshop which is purely around for freight forwarding and touches heavily on Incoterms. I am not going to go into too much detail with you today because if it's not relevant to your job, it'll go straight over your head. I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, but it's just not relevant. However, what I will talk about is what is Incoterms. So shipping terms are a very important aspect of international logistics as they determine the responsibility of cost, ownership, and risk. So just to give you a bit of background information. So in terms of Incoterms, they were started back in 1936 by the International Chamber of Commerce. This has been really useful for a pub quiz night. This might come up in the logistics section, it's worth knowing. But essentially what they are is reviewed every 10 years. And the last ones were in 2020. So by my maths, we've got another 5 years before the new Incoterms come in. And there may just be a slight variation. In the last revision, I think it was one minor change they made. But essentially, there are 11 Incoterms. I'll explain and demonstrate that in the next couple of slides. So I appreciate this isn't the best diagram in the world. But basically, this is your supply chain process when you are importing goods. So there is a kind of a starting point on the left-hand side, which is your seller or your exporter. And then you have a process to go through, which is documentation, moving a product to somewhere, and then ultimately going to a dock side, probably if you're moving by ocean, sticking it on a boat, unloading it from a boat, going to another named location, again, doing a bit more road or rail haulage, a bit more paperwork, and then going into an end destination. Now, that end destination could actually be your home, but more likely it's going to be a staging point before it actually comes to your address. So if you've ordered it and it's coming from the post office or whatever, or a distribution centre or somewhere along those lines, it'll come to a different named place. But essentially, that's the process you'll kind of go through. But what the Incoterms do, referring back to our previous slide, it said, so who is responsible? Who is paying? And where's the insurance kind of sitting? So what you then have an option to do is to decide how you want that journey to look and feel. And at what point you want to take responsibility, not take responsibility, what you want to pay for, what you want to pay for. So these Incoterms, which I'm not going to go into detail about, basically are the different points that you can take responsibility, give away responsibility, pay, not pay, that kind of stuff. So this is your front end bit. This is where it's physically being made. And these are the relevant freight prepayment Incoterms. And then you've got your back end, which again is your freight collect end. And these are the ones that will apply to that back end. So if you work in a business today, so you will have a process that you kind of work through on this daily on a daily basis today. I am not suggesting go and rip up what you're doing already because I'm about to tell you a better way of doing it. Not at all. There is a reason why you do what you do, and every organization is different. What I would say is just have a look at it and just go, does it actually tick the boxes I want it to kind of do? And is it the most cost effective and most efficient way of doing it? Or could a third party help me with that? Or could I do something different to make it come quickly? And basically what you're doing is managing risk. So you're managing whether it's cost risk or whether it's a liability, legal risk, an insurance risk, and just finding what is the right way for you. So there isn't a carte blanche. This is the way you do it. This is the industry practice. It just depends on your business and how involved you are or your partners are involved in that business. Now, again, a little handout for you, which you can take away and read and send yourself to sleep at night. Here's a slightly easier way of, these are your Incoterms on the left-hand side here. And these are basically the points that it kind of covers off in terms of your seller's obligation, transfer of risk, which is generally your ownership, and then your buyer's obligation on in the red as well. So it's a chart that gives you that, and then there's that graph, or sorry, there's those images that I showed you on that previous sheet in terms of where you're starting from, where you're finishing from. that's in terms of Incoterms. That's all I want to go through today, because unless you're actually doing the job, it isn't relevant. But Incoterms is very relevant, and you need to know about them. Does that kind of make sense?
You'll ask a stupid question.
There's no stupid question, Sam.
Why is it called Incoterms?
Great question.
International.
Yes. Yes, whatever Joe said. Yeah, there is a. Did I reference it? Yeah, it stands for something. International commercial terms. Yeah. Just checking you're awake, Samson. That's what it was. Flick across. I mentioned there about insurance. I've got a stat which I don't think I've put on here, and I can't remember exactly what it is. I had a stat about how many containers, so obviously a container within a container ship, are lost every year at sea. I think I can remember what it is. It's a round number. How many containers do you think are lost at sea every year in the world? Yeah, typically it's a ship that drops. It all goes. But how many individual units do you think are lost?
750,000. Yeah, one boat can carry about 80,000. So you need like 10 to
Any advance online?
Sorry, I missed that. I was having to send an email.
Call you out, Mike. No, have a guess. How many individual containers, so a single container, are lost at sea in a year, calendar year?
10.
10.
30,000.
We've got from, I think 10's the lowest.
50,000.
Actual boats or containers?
No, just so a cubic container.
Oh, okay.
It falls to the back of the lorry.
Okay, 50,000.
Okay. So the answer, and I was surprised when I read it, is 2,000. So you think of the thousands, hundreds of thousands that are being moved, millions are being used, just 2,000. Whether that's just 2,000 that before, I don't know. Anyway, so that's the stat. But the most important thing is there is a chance your container could fall off the back of a vessel.
Yeah.
Make sure you are insured at some point in that journey, and not just for the vessel, but as you say, if it falls off the back of a lorry, if something happens to it, water gets into it in some way, shape, or form, just make sure that. So within your Incoterms, make sure that you've got insurance covered off at the right time. It also, sorry, just jumping back, think about theft as well. That pops up there. Theft that could be, the pirates. Literally the pirates coming and taking them. But often you see, particularly on social media, there's a boat out there somewhere, not a carrier ship, and there's just a random container floating on the water. And you've got people trying to get into it, and it's mobile phones. Okay, so we talked about the modes of transport. So we talked about air freight, and I mentioned earlier about, air freight is the quickest way of getting something from A to B, but it's the most expensive way of getting something from A to B. So air freight typically is calculated by weight, and also you apply fuel surcharges even to them as well. So it's two factors that will be applied to your air freight, and also you're then trying to find a space on a flight that's kind of coming across. But it's certainly something that you'll get something within days rather than a boat which is going to take you weeks. In terms of sea freight charges, you've got lots of different options you can kind of go down. So typically when it's air freight, it's a box on a pallet and it's kind of coming in your direction. When it comes to sea freight, you can have a whole container, you can have a part container, you can have a consolidated vendor container that comes across. There's various different routes and they're all different prices. So again, it depends on what is the right thing for you to move forward. Again, it's that balance between cost and lead time. Then in terms of road freight, typically we see two types of pallets. We see a Euro pallet and we see a UK standard pallet, which are two different sizes. Effectively, a Euro pallet is twice as long as a UK pallet. So that's something to consider when you're moving your products on road. And also, something people forget about is whether it's stackable or non-stackable. So you're always looking at cubic fill of a vehicle that's being moved forward. But clearly, if a pallet is not stackable, if it's a little low pallet, you've got all this airspace which you're not filling within the back of a vehicle. So wherever possible, make sure you have stackable pallets of a Euro or a standard size. But equally, if you're somebody's moving quite a lot, you can have a full load or a dedicated vehicle. And then finally, the last one there is groupage. So if you're just producing a few pallets or a few boxes, then you may have a DHL or a FedEx or whatever who will come in and just bring in lots of different people, lots of different customers, and fill up a vehicle to take it from A to B. So again, with road freight, similar to air freight, lots of different ways in which you can move your product forward. I won't talk about trains. I won't talk about my little bike that I saw in Valencia, because we don't need to worry about those things. So that's kind of the Incoterm and kind of import export bit kind of done with. But as I say, we can go into more detail at a later date should you wish to go through that. The next bit then is looking at logistics and distribution itself. So in terms of logistics within supply chain management, so logistics is not about just storage, which is warehousing. Sorry, logistics is all about storage, is warehousing, and distribution, which is the movement of the goods afterwards. So you're storing it and then you're going to be physically moving it. And again, relative straightforward. The R's of logistics is making sure you've got the right product, the right quantity, the right condition, in the right place, being delivered at the right time, to the right customer, at the right price. So let's go back to my Amazon example that I kind of talked about earlier. And I've got an idea. I want to buy a whatever. So I go onto Amazon. Do you sell a whatever? Amazon then says, yes, I sell all these sorts of whatevers. And then I start drilling into a bit more detail. So is it on Prime? Because I'm a Prime member. What's the price going to be? What the review's going to be? So I start drilling into all that kind of detail. So effectively, I'm kind of drilling into these R's. So my daughter, so I'm the only one who has Prime in the household. So my daughter always comes up to me, Dad, this, I want this tomorrow. Get it tomorrow. And she's always ordering something from China that takes weeks. But it's really cheap. Yeah, but if you want it tomorrow, you've got to pay 10 times the price. I'm not paying that amount. Whatever you're. So making sure you understand what these are going to be for your business and for that particular product or service is important. So in terms of the Cambridge Dictionary, what it says about distribution is the process of transporting products from a manufacturer, storing them and selling them to different stores and customer. So distribution, we often just think about is that's the lorry that goes past the door. Well, there's a lot more behind it. So it's understanding, again, that terminology of distribution. What does that mean for you, your business, and your suppliers? What are you asking for from those partners that you're working with? And within our distribution, it's making sure you understand what those components are. So we've got a good transport system, a good packaging system, a good tracking system, knowing where sales can be maximized, and also having a returns system as well. So if you pick on those, the big guys like a FedEx, DHL, Royal Mail, and we are kind of not a great example, but are a good example. Royal Mail, for particular, don't have a good return system. So Royal Mail person goes out every day and delivers their letters and their parcels and whatever. They don't bring anything back to the depot, but a DHL or a FedEx or whatever, they're constantly doing a round trip. So we are always dropping off and then we're picking up and bringing stuff and bringing it back. So they're making an efficient use of their time. So what are the post office going to do? I think I read yesterday, second class mail is now going to come every other day, is it? And no deliveries on Saturdays and stuff, because they just can't make money at the moment. So understanding if you've got your own distribution part of your business, do you have a good component elements of it? And if you're using a third party, how's that working for you? So I just talked about reverse logistics or reverse distribution. So it's the process of accepting and processing goods that have been returned from a customer or distribution partner. Now, I would love to say that if you're ordering your goods, they always come to you perfect. So they're never damaged. The quality is always there. They've arrived in a timeline they're supposed to arrive in. It doesn't always happen. Yes, you want your percentages to be high, so it's sitting at sort of 95% perfect every time, but sometimes it isn't. So you're going to have issues with returns. So you need to understand what your returns process is. So what's your internal returns inspection like and paperwork process? And then how's that going to work with your distributor if you're using a third party? If it's your own, again, understand maximizing that process. Recalls, you could have items that are going back. How are they going to go back? In terms of repairs, so is that something I can repair on site, or is it something that I'm going to have to send away elsewhere for somebody else to kind of deal with? Unsold goods. So sometimes you will have a sale or return process. If I don't sell them, I can just send them back, but you may not get the best price for them. So there's going to be an unsold process. Damaged goods, as I mentioned before, excess inventory that we mentioned very early on from COVID-19 times. So there was an opportunity potentially to send stuff back. And then the last bit is around disposal. So again, if something isn't selling, it could be a perishable item, or it could be something that reaches the end of its, you'll have heard the term reaches the end of its shelf life. Sometimes that can be a bit of fashion. So we've bought some fashion, it's not relevant, it's not worth me holding on to it, so I'll just get rid of it. So does disposal mean stick it in a bin and recycle it? Does it mean it goes down an actual disposal route, which is like a market or something along those lines? So understanding, what your reverse logistics looks like as an organisation is really important, and those items which you're not going to sell through. That's end of module 4. Any questions?
More about curiosity. Out of the distributions that you and they would set, what one used?
As in air, sea.
Is there any stats in
There
that?
will be. I can't quote them to you,
Yeah.
but I asked
One here.
the question in the room.
Is that which ones? Is what I'll show you the
So I would guess and challenge me on this one because I'm guessing that probably 80% probably gets moved via ocean. I would guess. Yeah.
Because a lot of times they move from ocean, like so from China to here, and road anyway. So sometimes I send them saying,
yeah.
We'll get it dual-handed anyway.
It's a good point, and for those online, Joe's just referenced effectively using multiple shipment methods. So you could choose to put it on a boat to a certain destination and then air freight it in or road freight it in. So that's your other hybrid methodology that says, I need it here quick. I can't afford to wait for an ocean, but I can't fly it. So do a combination of both, and you'll get it there a little bit quicker.
We do a similar thing where we may say if we've got 200 pieces, we might say air freight 10 pieces and then send the balance by boat.
That's it. And that way, sometimes you're showing willing to your customer that it gives them something to go along with, or it helps in terms of your manufacturing process. It means you can start it and then you can afford to wait for the rest of it to come on the sea. Thanks, Mike. Okay, let's talk about import and export. Sort of the next sort of level. And again, I'm going to try and do this overarching without going into too much sort of geeky detail for you. Just going to touch on Brexit. Again, it does feel like I'm being very political today, talking about these sort of subjects. I don't mean to be, but it is very relevant. A bit of documentation, VAT, export documentation, international trade documentation, classification of goods. So I mentioned earlier, 24th June 2016, we voted to leave Europe. And that had a massive knock-on effect because I don't think anyone actually thought it was going to happen. And then when it did happen, and again, to get political, when Boris had his big red bus and made all these promises, we're going to save all this money. It was absolute rubbish that he came up with. And nobody actually thought about the knock-on effect that was going to happen. So then it was a case of, it's now happened, how are we going to deal with this situation? And we kind of went from a standing start of nobody knew what was going to happen. So we've gone through a massive number of changes to make it happen. And say some businesses have thrived off the back of it, some of them have have died off the back of it.
What sort of businesses and
Yeah, process
Forwarders.
orders. Yeah,
consultants trying to dig businesses out of the mess that's caused by Brexit, I suppose.
That's why, yeah, that's why we found a free cable consultants for that reason, because we all come to us.
It's saying
It's very good, yeah.
yeah.
there's also a great opportunity for people to kind of use a football analogy, put foot on ball, and go right. Let's review our supply chain. What are we doing here? And actually, can we go onshore? So can we bring stuff that traditionally we bring in from abroad? Can we actually create it in the UK? So from a raw materials point of view, from a manufacturing point of view. So actually the UK have actually benefited from us leaving because our manufacturing has become much bigger, much stronger now.
And fundamentally, that's what the Trump's viewpoint is, isn't it? To kickstart manufacturing the rest of it within the US rather than this outsourcing.
Which is, and I'm not a Trump supporter, I don't like the man, but it makes sense.
It makes sense, but I don't think it's considered the lead time to achieve what you want to do, but imagine the damage to export to a country while you're building up to that point, because there's no infrastructure.
But that's the, again, not to get political, that's the term of office bit, isn't it? Like any government, you're only in for a short period of time. Well, actually, you want that, go back to our strategy that we talked about before. You need a 20-year strategy that you can kind of work off, not a case of every 4 years, and then the next government comes in, and then we have to rip up everything that was there before because it was, yes. Anyway, so in terms of Brexit, what effects do we have? Tariffs. Tariffs changed, bit like what Trump is doing at the moment. Tariffs did change for UK businesses. Legalities, again, some things were better, some things weren't better. Customs, so we had extra charges that were going in if you're importing in and out. VAT changes, supply chain changes. So actually what has now happened is for UK businesses, they've created hubs in Europe. So if we're bringing stuff in from abroad, rather than bringing them straight into the UK, if we're then going to export them straight back out again, we bring them into Europe, do whatever we want to do, and then export straight out of Europe. And it's a way of stopping them from having to bring them into the UK, pay extra levies to move them back out again. So it's just a different way of working.
Thinking that's what these hubs have been, just talked about it, we're very setting up the hubs when that's the country that they're bringing them into.
Yeah.
Is it because there's less restrictions there and the is about to run
Ease and convenience. And again, lead times of stuff getting stuck. So it becomes a slightly more direct model.
So we hold it there and then deal with the distribution from that country maybe. So there's quite a lot of Romanian businesses that this within this group is doing. I think fundamentally that's what they want. That's why they don't.
Tax breaks are probably better as well. It kind of, if you're bringing it in to send it straight back out again, it kind of makes sense to kind of do that. Yeah, lead times. So lead times have been lengthened if you're then having to bring them through. So many products that just got sat at customs and just didn't move. So it's had that knock-on effect. And also things like grants and incentives. So from Europe, we used to be able to access a number of different levies. So you think about the farmers, for example, they used to get money for just not doing anything with the field, just let the field go. But now those grants aren't available, and the UK grants are not as big. Training grants, for example, are not as, they used to be better when we were part of Europe, and they're not anymore. So it's had a knock-on effect, dramatically knock-on effect. We're coming out of where are we 9 years later? Some things are better, some things aren't better. So in terms of what are wider implications, it's actually opened up the rest of the world to us. Now, whether we've actually maximised that opportunity, I would question. But whereas before we were kind of more channeled towards just working within Europe, now we can kind of go out anywhere. Adopting free trade agreements around the world. As I say, implications to trade beyond the EU, and also understanding now the importance of something called the WTO, the World Trade Organization. Basically, the World Trade Organization basically helps overarching manage the sale of goods through the world and tries to have some kind of measure in place, some kind of control in place. So basically, the phrase, you know, comparing apples with apples, pears with pears. But if you're selling apples, then they're kind of being sold around the world as the same type of product at a similar-ish type of price. They've got controls basically in place to make sure that countries aren't sort of fleecing other countries. That's the idea behind it. But fundamentally, with things like Brexit, the important thing is to make sure that you secure your supply chain. So I think in the next couple of years, Brexit will drop off this presentation deck because we've been there, done it, bought the t-shirt. But what was important is to make sure that you understand your transport and logistics issues, your sourcing implications, particularly if you sourced from Europe or your product came through Europe, minimizing that delay and that uncertainty by getting it stuck in places, making sure you've got supplier contracts, because believe it or not, some people just had that gentleman's agreement, and those contracts were not in place or were massively out of date. And then making sure that we're registered with something called the AEO, which is the Authorised Economic Operator. So it's kind of like a standard. You join that organisation and they kind of manage and monitor things moving forward. As you would expect, if you're moving anything, we love a bit of paperwork. So you've got to make sure your documentation is in place. If your documentation isn't in place, then products will get stopped. They will get stuck, whether that's in customs or border control. And if you get caught with moving with incorrect paperwork or not the right paperwork or no paperwork, that's going to sort of have a negative effect on you moving stuff in the future. You get like a black mark against you. So you could get to a point where every single shipment you try and bring in is stopped at customs for them to check your paperwork and move you forward. So using third parties like UniServe to kind of help in that process will make sure you go through in the right way. VAT is something also to consider, which has been a bit of a change. So you pay VAT on inputs to HMRC at the same rate as UK goods. And if you're registered with VAT, you can reclaim your VAT in the same way for goods purchased within the UK. The VAT is accounted for in your VAT returns. Probably not something you guys need to worry about too much, but if you're running your own organisation or a senior person within an organisation, just understand your VAT implications for those products you're bringing in. Some of them will not have that, some of them will have that. So understand your inventory, your materials that you bring in, and understand how VAT is applicable to them. Now, I could get really detailed on this one, and I'm not going to, but classification of goods. So any product that you bring in, so let's pick on our mobile phone again, has a classification ID. It has to have that to be able to bring it in. So again, from a world perspective, we recognise, actually, what is that? What am I holding up? When it comes, I said I wouldn't go to detail, and now we're going into detail.
iPhone 13.
Sorry, Mike.
iPhone.
It is. So it's interesting. Naturally, you always go, that's a phone, that's a mobile phone. But if you think about what do I really use this for? How much do I use it for making phone calls, and how much is it for doing something like email, social media, the torch, which I have to use? So when you come to classification of goods, you always have to look at an item and say, what is it? But you go to the core purpose. What's the core purpose of that? It was created to be a mobile telephone, but we just use it for lots of other different devices. So when it comes to classification, you just need to understand what is that? What item are you actually bringing in? If you've got that, then that's obviously a pen, isn't it? There's no, I'm not James Bond, it is a pen. So that's a really simple one. But things like mobile phones, it becomes quite difficult. But we must make sure that we classify our goods. So when it comes back to our paperwork, we're bringing something in, we must make sure that we have a classification of goods on in there. And there is codes that we kind of need to work through, which I'm not going to work through today, to make sure you do that. I do have a separate course for that. If you want to sign up to that one, strongly recommend it. So these basically tell customs officials, what's being imported, if the goods are admissible, and what taxes, if any, are due. So if I decided on my paperwork to call that a pen, which is not, I could be paying X rate for that to bring it in, and it's incorrect, because a pen probably is a lot cheaper to bring in than a mobile phone. Because our data guys are here, I thought I'll leave this slide in. So also, the countries are very nosy in terms of that paperwork, because they want to know what is actually being moved around. So they want to know about, from a taxation point of view, from a trade policy point of view. So if I'm a bicycle manufacturer, so Britain is known for bicycles, it is not, but let's say it's known for making bicycles, and another country has decided it wants to flood the market full of bicycles. Because we know about all this data that's going in, then somebody may step in and go, whoa, 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 we're going to put a trade embargo on bicycles because we are the bicycle manufacturers of this world. Or we're going to put heavy tariffs on, like Trump is doing, to say, right, you can bring bikes in, but we're going to charge you 50% tariff costs for bringing them in. So you're able to manage then your kind of manufacturing capabilities in theory within your country. So you can have a look at things like quota controls, as I just mentioned there, economic research, lots of different bits of data out there, but you're getting that from the paperwork that's coming through, so you can see what is being moved in and out of your country. That's module 5, import, export. Any questions around that? Okay. Any questions online?
No, just that I hate import and export.
Don't worry, Mike, we'll spend some time together. I'll get you to love it.
Yeah.
The last module we're going to move on to, we are slightly ahead of time, but don't worry, there's lots of slides in this last section to go through. It isn't a case of last module, 2 slides and that's it. There's a few to go through. But as we go into this last section, if I haven't covered off something that you were desperate to cover off, then let me know and we can always talk about it, or you can stay behind and I can bore you for hours on whatever it may be. But we'll talk about inventory and warehousing. So the bits we're going to kind of cover off is inventory, warehouse management, process flows, principles, the future, data industry 4.0, and sustainability. So this slide appeared a little bit earlier, but in terms of our inventory types, so we're looking at bringing in things like raw materials. It could be something called WIP, so work in progress. So it could be component parts and also finished goods. So depending on your business, what you do, there could be 3 different elements of it, or you may just have finished goods. So think about that Amazon warehouse. It's not going to have raw materials in there. It's not going to have component parts. It's a finished goods. It's a one of these. It's a one of these. It's a one of these. You get the gist. It's a finished good that's sat in their warehouse. But your warehouse might have lots of different things. So picking on Mike, so Mike will definitely have different elements in it. He will have raw materials, he'll have part finished goods, and he'll have finished goods. Is that correct, Mike?
Yeah, all 3, yeah.
So understanding the importance of inventory. So first of all, you will have a system somewhere within your building that's hopefully managing that. Now, it could be a pen and a bit of paper. It could be an Excel spreadsheet, but it's more likely to be some software of some sort. And what that's going to do is help the following. So meet the anticipated customer demand. So we're already seeing, hopefully through our POS data, through our selling data of some sort, we know what's actually our customers are wanting. So we're predicting and forecasting that demand. We create seasonal inventories to meet seasonal demand. So yeah, I sell inflatables that go in pools. Guess what? That's only going to happen probably mainly during the summer. So think about what you're selling, Christmas trees, whatever it's going to be. Help the business cope with those disruptions. So those disruptions could be geopolitical, it could be a stock out, it could be a case of what was it a few years ago? They were struggling to get copper. So we're struggling to mine copper because of droughts. So you need water to help mine copper. So because we were having droughts, we couldn't get copper. So a lot of cars couldn't be produced because they needed the copper within like the electronic systems. So lots of things you just don't expect. Protection against stockouts. So understand why am I out of stock of that particular item? Is it my poor forecasting and demand management, or is it something to do with whoever is supplying that particular item? Also have a think about price increases. It's a really, really tricky one in terms of do I put the price up? If I put the price up, nobody will buy it. But I've got to put the price up because the cost of goods, or the cost of making those goods is high. So you've really got to kind of work on that. But it might have an effect on that inventory in terms of how many you can actually bring in. And the last point here, when you're talking about inventory management, is taking advantage of quality discounts. So naturally, if I order more, I get cheaper, can't I? Which usually is the case, but those kind of brackets you're kind of working with sometimes are too high. So actually, I don't have the physical capacity to hold my million bananas that I kind of want to bring in. I think I can sell them, but I can't hold them. So just have a think about what those levels are. And it may be that you want to switch to a different supplier, because if you switch to a different supplier, those levels are lower and I can get a better price for them. So there's our stock out. That isn't my bread counter, by the way, because my bread thing was far bigger than that, far emptier than that. But using that example earlier, you know, as a supermarket, there's certain things you just never, ever run out of. Within your business, there were certain things you never, ever run out of. Again, in my IKEA days, you never run out of meatballs. You never run out of hot dogs. You just don't do that. And just interestingly, with I always use this as an example. So anything that you buy from a food perspective from IKEA, they don't make any money on. That's their marketing bit. That's to get them to drag you into the store because everyone wants a meatball, a hot dog, or whatever. So just think about, you know, within your business, what are those important items you must never ever run out of? What is your bread and milk? Safety stock. So safety stock is, so when you, again, in this session, I'm not going to go into detail about coming up with different formulas of how to work out this, that, and the other. But there are formulas to make sure that you've got the right sort of stock levels, which you can adapt and tweak. But safety stock means that basically you're always going to have an amount of stock sat on your shelf. So you're never going to run through. Now, something may happen that means it goes through because it's ice lollies and suddenly we've gone through the hottest summer in the world and you've run out of ice lollies. Sometimes that will happen. But basically, you'll have a level where you never drop below. I've got a better graphic, which I'll show you in a minute. So safety stock is an element of your calculation of your inventory you're going to have there. So I sell 1,000 widgets, but I always have 100 on the shelf. So I'm going to order 1,100 widgets that are going to kind of... Yeah. But that percentage could change through the course of the year, depending on the product. Correct. Yeah. And also factor in damage, shrinkage. So people will damage stuff, people will nick stuff, and you've got to create that as part of your percentage as a calculation to go into your inventory calculation. Sorry, unfortunately, that's just the way it is. And also something called human error. Now, this doesn't apply to any of us in the room because we don't do human error. But believe it or not, there are people out there who make mistakes, not deliberately, hopefully, but that does happen. But this is the inventory C, as they call it. So basically, we've got our boat that is floating on the water. The graphic's not very good, but floating on the water across here. And then below, we've got our rocks, things that we can't see under the ground, under the sea. And what we have is we need to factor in all of these particular issues that affect the amount of stock we're actually going to hold. So our first little peak, our first little rock that's in our ocean is production problems. Second one, which we deem to be even higher, could be supplier problems. So we've identified we always have issues with certain suppliers. We don't manage them particularly well. So that for us is going to be a big issue that we're going to manage through. High levels of emergent demand. So additional demand coming through that we perhaps didn't expect. Inaccurate forecasting, because typically we're really poor at it. So we know that, so we're going to factor that in. And also maybe poor quality of product. So returns, damaged stock that's going to come through. So there are peaks. So in an ideal world, our inventory level should be at this blue level here. But what we may choose to do is to raise the level up to where this boat is. It's going to swim along the sea very happily, missing all of our rocks. But what that does mean is we are holding a lot of stock, a lot of money in our business that potentially we don't need.
So would you say that businesses that sell perishable items have high risks associated with?
100%. They are sailing close to the wind on a very regular basis. Yeah, just an absolute nightmare. So go back to my Sainsbury's days. Those that are just selling tins of this, that, and the other, bottles of this, that, happy days, easy life. For the fruit and veg guy, for me and my bread and my cake, and the milk guy, we've got our issues. So we should be paid danger money for that, really. So that's a really good graphic just to kind of see that. So what you need to do in your business is just to understand what are my rocks, what are my peaks that are going to be, and how am I going to kind of manage that through. So one thing to help you on that journey is within your business, you're going to have items that are really high priorities, and you've got those that are low item priorities. Those high ones are going to be the ones that are selling on a regular basis, or could be high value items. And the C items, sorry, the lower items are going to be the ones that don't move very often. But sometimes you've got to have that item to be able to sell another item. So it could well be that, go back to my pen, my component part within my pen is that I've got ink. So what am I going to sell more of, ink or pens? Now, if it's a refillable pen, in theory, I've only got to order those. So I'm going to be selling more ink than I am going to be selling pens. So what we do with our inventory, and whether you've got 10 items or whether you've got 1 million items, is you're going to categorize those items into something called ABC. So you may have heard of something called Pareto analysis. So basically what you'll do is you'll have ABC items. You may choose to have D, E, and F items, depending on how you want to categorize your items. But basically your A items are your top items. They're the ones that you're going to be looking at on a regular basis. I never want to sell out of those because they're my high earners or my big churn items. So my meatballs at IKEA, never going to sell out of those. They are my A items. My B items are going to be something that, yeah, I want to make sure I'm not really running out of those, but they're not the end of the world if I kind of run out. And then your C items generally are just slow turn items. If I run out, say to the, but you know, they're a lower type item. And then in my IKEA days, we used to have another categorization, which was D, which was just called concrete. So I can't sell this item for love nor money. Nobody wants to buy it. It's been sat here for years. And over time, that concrete often becomes heavier and bigger. So at some point, you have to make that decision. So I just need to get rid of that item then. So it could be just a disposal straight in the bin, or it could be going through bargain corner for those who go to IKEA. There's always that bargain corner bit. Try and move those items. So understand within your stock levels, how am I categorizing them in terms of like A, B's and C's. So moving on from inventory and then just having a look at warehouse management. So in terms of our definition, so warehouse management involves the principles and processes around running day-to-day warehouse operations, including organizing the warehouse space, receiving items, scheduling labor, fulfilling orders, tracking inventory as it moves through the warehouse. And an effective warehouse management optimizes and integrates these procedures to increase productivity and lower costs within the warehouse. So that's the definition of a perfect warehouse. Again, we don't live in a perfect world. There'll be certain things in our warehouse we're very good at, certain things we're not quite so good at. But effectively within our warehouse, we have 6 processes. Again, relatively straightforward. We receive items, we process items, we pick items, we pack items, we manage those items, and we ship out the door. Very simple, 6 processes of warehouse management. Now, the bits that are a little bit more interesting are the principles of our warehouse. So here's our warehouse here, and our 6 principles sit along the left-hand side. So in logistics world, a warehouse's definition is it's a shed. Yeah, and you put stuff in shed, but there is a purpose to that shed, and each shed could be different depending on the product that's in there, the use of it. So is it your shed? Are you renting it out to somebody else? Is it one of a number of sheds that you may have within your organization? So understanding the objective and purpose is important. Also understanding its functionality and the volume, the controls that sit within there, the resilience, customer focus, and also the data that sits behind in there. So I'm just going to go to a little bit more detail around that. So first of all, understand the purpose of the shed that you are building. So you need to understand specific delivery requirements. What sector is actually serving, the nature of storing those goods, the requirement of any specialized storage, equipment, and the labor. So I'm not just going to build a shed for the sake of building a shed in the middle of nowhere. It's got to be built in the right place for the right reason. So there is a demand for holding this particular item in this particular location. So I will build a shed. Now, does that shed need to be just dry storage? Does it need to be for wet storage? Is it for chilled? Is it for frozen? What's it need to be? What is the demand behind it? So you're going to understand all of that. And then once you're building it, you're going to go, right, do I need wide aisles, narrow aisles, big forklift trucks to drive it around? Do I need lots of labor, no labor? Is it going to be a dark warehouse that just robots just run it all for me? What's the purpose behind it? So understand that before you do it. So know the purpose of it. Just to kind of sidetrack a little bit, I'm sure you've heard of terminology of called maybe 3PL or 4PL. I've just put a graphic up here which just shows basically the journey between the use and the purpose of a warehouse. So on the left hand side here, you've got something called 1PL. A 1PL basically is, and the example we're showing here is a farmer that sells eggs. So you put your eggs along the top of here. So a 1PL basically is a farmer that says, right, I've got chickens out the back, lay eggs, and then I sell them. I sell them at the end of my driveway or whatever. That's called a 1PL. Only one person involved in the process. A 2PL involves two people. So in this particular situation, I've got a delivery truck that's taking them to a shop. So basically, my chickens produce them, stick them on a wagon, and then they go into a shop. That's 2PL. A 3PL, as you can kind of see from here, involves, in this particular situation, like eggs going to a packing location, into a warehouse, and then being delivered out, and then into a store of some description. And that's your typical 3PL that we see mostly out there. But you can actually now push this along to being a 4PL, which is a logistics company that then manages your 3PL. So you might find that that's what Uniserve do. So we do a bit of 3PL, but we also do a bit of management on behalf of the people as well, being 4PL. And then 5PL, and then it doesn't go beyond 5. 5 is the maximum we do currently, is a logistics company that manages basically everything within a supply chain network. And that's called a 5PL. So that's the transition between the different PLs. Is that a bit too geeky? Is that a bit like gone a bit too far there?
What's the PL?
Sorry?
PL stand for?
It's just the amount of people that are in the chain that there is. So we talked about the use of our warehouse and whether it's a 1PL, 2PL, 3PL, 4, 5. Also then to know its functional requirements. So what's the reason for it? So for example, like speed, are we going through really quickly? So if we are, make sure our warehouse is laid out in the most appropriate way. Make sure we've got the appropriate kit that's in there to be able to kind of do that. How many bay doors do we need to have? How high is it going to be? All that kind of stuff. Internally, how are we managing everything? So I mentioned KPIs earlier. Metrics are really important for any business. So am I doing well? Am I not doing well? Am I about on par? So having KPIs will help you. And there's just some examples of the different types of measurements you can do. And whether that's internal, managing a supplier, or managing a customer. So what is the most important thing that you kind of need to go through? So you may find your internal KPIs are quite high, but they are focused on stuff that's relevant to your business. Supplier KPIs are stuff that's coming into your business. So you're managing your customer, your supplier that way. And then you've got customer KPIs where you are managing what happens with that customer and the different elements that sit within there. So 3 different sections of KPIs. But the takeaway is have KPIs and metrics in your business. That's really, at any business, whether you're a service business or whether you're a physical business, make sure you're measuring what does good look like.
Didn't Alison have a conversation around the internal KPIs? Employees literally running through the next. We on this massive and sitting this massive warehouse, and they were running in it one place to another. Amazon employees, yeah.
Was that Channel 4 done the documentary? Was the TV on, wasn't it?
Yeah, they've sent someone in the department to the Amazon warehouse. Employee to hit their own KPIs, otherwise they didn't get percentage of their bonuses and everything else. That it was.
It's interesting when it comes to people picking. So there's different ways in which you can pick. So you've got orders, so you can kind of work off. Then you've got voice activated ones. You've got eyesight ones. Lots of different ways you can pick. So things like the voice ones, when you get good at what you do, you can then speed it up. So if you were to put a headset on and do an experienced person's, all you can do is, but the person knows exactly what they're saying and can kind of speed things up. But obviously the robots are now very much in place, kind of taking those kind of manual tasks on. So let's talk about control then. So so you've got lots of different processes within your own warehouse, and it's making sure you've got the control of the top one there is people. And yes, metrics are a part of that, but also making sure the environment is right for that individual. So in terms of heat, light, having the right equipment, is it a safe working environment, all that kind of stuff. So making sure it's really important. You know, can you move your goods freely around? So earlier on, one of the slides had that picture of just overstock, the stock everywhere. Again, an IKEA story I can tell you from my day of, so I worked at IKEA Wednesbury, which is the Birmingham store. And when I joined them, they were in transition. So they were rebuilding the store. But what they'd had to do is take a load of stuff out of the store. So we had external warehouses. We had 4 external warehouses. And you walked into an external warehouse and it wasn't fit for purpose. And there was just stock everywhere. So people would climb over stock, over stock to get to stock. So our damages were kind of through the roof. So we didn't have a building that was fit for purpose. It was a leaky roof and all that kind of stuff. And people just didn't care. So why should I be bothered? Health and safety was diabolical, all that kind of stuff. And you think from an IKEA perspective, it must be great. If it runs to plan and you've got everything you need, then fine. But otherwise it can be really difficult. So just making sure basically you've got a place that's kind of fit for purpose, have those controls in place that you can kind of manage everything that's kind of going through, which includes equipment and completing orders. Again, using IKEA. So if IKEA go and buy a new store, there is a manual, there is a calculation that says, if your store is X size, you will hold X amount of stock of X amount of lines, require X amount of forklift trucks, X amount of racking. It's all a calculation that's done that just said, that's what you need. And if you manage that inventory correctly, hopefully you'll prevent dead stock or perishability, optimize your storage cost, maintain sufficient stock, enhance your cash flow, and also reducing purchase cost of risk. I mean, you've already got a good inventory management objectives and systems that are happening within your warehouse. Anyone heard of 5S or Kaizen? So you've heard of Toyota cars. So the Japanese Toyota back in the 70s were exceptional in terms of creating process. So making sure that we do the same thing, repeat the same thing over and over again to keep the same quality levels, to maximize efficiency, all that kind of stuff. And one thing that's really come into our warehouses is something called Kaizen, and an element of Kaizen is something called 5S. And these are your 5S's along here. Very, very, very simple. Basically, 5S means that everything has its place. So in the room that we're in today, in an ideal world, everything has its place. So when we're finished for the day, everything goes back into a certain location. So the bin lives in a certain location, the cameras live in a certain location, remote controls go in a certain location. So basically everything has its place. So when the next person comes in, they go, this is here, this is here, this is here. And you can do the same in your warehouse. And basically it helps in terms of the 5S's being you sort, you streamline, you shine, you clean, everything is standardized in the way that we do it. And then it means it's really easy to sustain what you're doing. So basically you've proven the formula and you're doing the same thing over and over again. So if you walked into a warehouse, for example, they would have demarcation on the floor. So this is where you walk. This is where you park a forklift truck. This is where the bins are. If you need to sweep up, there's where the broom lives. So shadow boards and things like that will exist within warehouses. I've not quite gone that way in my home, but I am so very, very tempted kind of do that. But I know my wife would go mental. Hello.
Getting one the best every single time.
Yeah, kind of. Marginal gains is kind of what you're talking about, which is always looking at a process and trying to improve it. And yeah, any 1% that you can get means you're 1% better than you were before. So it's kind of an element of that, which is kind of, there's an element called Plan, Do, Check, Act. So constantly reviewing what you're doing, having a good discussion about it, and then hopefully finding a tweaked solution and implementing it. So yeah. You build your shed and you go, it's for this purpose, or we define what it's going to be. And I put the right kit in there and I put the right people in there. However, things change. So making sure your warehouse has resilience and flexibility is also really, really important. So can I suddenly go taller, go wider, put a mezzanine floor in, put heavier items in there? Can I have a locked area, all that kind of stuff? So just thinking about your warehouse and saying, Okay, does it serve a purpose for now, for 5 years, for 10 years? What's our strategy moving forward? Can I extend it? All that kind of stuff. That's really, really important. A very depressing picture, a building on fire. Just a little story about this one. I mentioned earlier, I worked for a company, a US company, and they made vending machines. So think chocolate bar vending machines, but not for chocolate bars because we didn't do food. We didn't want to pass that certification. But if you went to a warehouse environment and you saw one of our machines, inside them would be high-vis vests, ear protection, PPE, all that kind of stuff that would sit within them. So what we did is we shipped them in from the US, and then we took our orders, customized them however our customer wanted them, did the layouts of all of them, and then we sent them out. We also did asset protection lockers. So if something was of an asset to you, so think about tablet, for example, you've got locker systems you can kind of put them in, and also click and collect. So your Amazon parcel lockers, all that kind of stuff. That's what we did. And our building was along here. And then one day we had our warehousing here on one side of Worcester, and the opposite side of Worcester was our offices, and we had quite tall offices, and we were on top floor. And I got a call one day from the warehouse team to say, bit of a problem. What's that? There's a fire going on. In our building? No. Oh, next door. Oh, look out the window. So I was able to look out the window from 3 miles in the opposite direction to see plumes of smoke appearing. And what this was an Arrow XL distribution centre that had soft furnishings, mattresses, all that kind of stuff, some nice burnable stuff. And basically, somebody had gone for his tea break, made some toast, left the toaster on, put it on, burn, and guess what? Caught on fire. And the net result was the whole building caught on fire. Now, you might say, well, what's that got to do with you and your building? Well, my building was over here with lots of electronic devices and chips and all this kind of stuff. And basically, it burned through this warehouse, into this warehouse, into this warehouse, and then into my warehouse. So I had smoke damage in all of my warehouses. So all my stock, basically, I had to write off, couldn't do anything about it. And the lead time for shipping something from the US, 12 weeks. So for 3 months, basically, we had no orders that we could fulfill. So the reason I tell you this is we had to have a plan B. So we had to go and find a warehouse because we couldn't use these. In fact, these got knocked down. So very quickly, we had to go and find another warehouse to go and start operations up again. These guys had to knock down their building, and all the employees got moved to 30 miles away up into Birmingham. And they've had to rebuild all this. In fact, most of this estate they've now had to rebuild just because of this fire. But did we have a contingency plan in place? No. Did these guys? No. So we're all just blaming each other, going, it's your fault, your fault, your fault. Was our insurance right? Dodgy. Did we have a plan with our US office about fast tracking stuff through? No, because they didn't have the stock. So we had many, many issues, and we didn't have that future planning in place. The positive bit was that what we did, instead of having our separate office and warehouse location, is we need to be under one roof in a brand new location that is as far away as these guys as we can go. So we actually then changed the business model, found a new location, actually in a different town, but found a building that was suitable for us to grow moving forward, because this wasn't. So in some ways, it actually helped us to kind of kick us to kind of move us on to the next level. Customer, believe it or not, customers are really annoying, but really, really important into our business. So making sure you measure, and a really good measurement for warehouses is something called OTIF, on time in full delivery. So basically it means my customer is expecting 1,000 pieces. Guess what? I've sent them 1,000 pieces and they expect them next day, and I've sent them next day. So in terms of our OTIF, 100%, we've done that. So managing that is really, really important to make sure you're managing your customer's expectation. So when I order my item from Amazon and it says next day, I expect it there next day. Now I know it won't be there at 9 o'clock in the morning. It's more likely to be 8 o'clock at night, but it will be there next day, hopefully. And there's just a graphic there in terms of kind of how you can kind of measure. So you can look at things like case fill, order fill, line fill, requested delivery date, scheduled delivery appointment date, or committed date. But the takeaway is to make sure within your business, again, whether it's internal or external, is how do you measure customer satisfaction? So how do you know you're doing a good job, and how do you know that your customer is happy with what is being provided to them? And if they want to challenge you, you can say, well, that's what we said, and that's what we've done. I mentioned earlier about my poor planning and my car hire experience that didn't quite go to plan. So I thought, I'm going to chill out on my holiday because I don't want to stress about it. I'll deal with it when I get home. And sure enough, as soon as I landed back on Saturday, I got an email. Give us a review about how your experience was. And I went, happy days. So I started writing my review and carried it on. And then I found myself just typing, and then realised I'd run out of characters. So we want your feedback. However, we only want a little bit of feedback, not a lot of feedback. So then I had to go back and start amending it all. So again, when you're measuring that customer satisfaction, have the right tools and systems in place that doesn't then re-frustrate your customer, and then follow back. And you might go, you were right, we were wrong, sorry, and this is what we're going to do about it. Just don't leave me hanging. So at the moment, I'm being left hanging, which also doesn't help. Data. Fundamentally, the biggest change that is happening within supply chains is the more data that is available for us to access, to share, to make us better as an organization and help within our supply chains. So rather than just looking at it independently, let's connect the dots of our supply chain. So if we're happy to share that information, let's share that information. Let's have systems that work together. Simple things like if I'm ordering an item from a factory in China, just send me a push notification on email that says it is now at the stage gate point. So we finished it. It is now ready to be collected. It's been collected. It's on a boat. It's landed. It's going to be with simple little things like that. That's the type of data that we want to share. But also, if you've got more complex data, then again, share that type of information within your supply chain. It will help you and help them. I've got a video which I won't click on today, but this data sharing is kind of called one of two things, which is either Industry 4.0 or Supply Chain 4.0. And basically, it's around the reorganization of supply chains using technologies such as design and planning information, production information, distribution information, consumption, and reverse logistics. So again, coming off the back of things like COVID-19, where we had poor relationships with our supplier, people have really gone the other way now and gone, let's see if we can really maximize the efficiency of our supply chains. Like I had a graphic earlier that told you what PL1 was, a 1PL, 2PL, 3PL, 4PL, 5PL. This just tells you a little about how we managed to get to Industry 4.0 or Supply Chain 4.0. Back in the days before I was born, thankfully, we started with Industry 1.0, and it's when industry first started within the world, or particularly within the UK, and it was the mechanism of things like steam-powered stations and tractors and all that kind of stuff. Industry 2.0 was when we started mass producing things and actually having assembly lines that needed some kind of electric power to kind of move them. Industry 3.0, so we're talking, back in the kind of the 60s, 50s, 60s. Industry 3.0 then came in and we started to bring things like automated production systems, computers, ITs, and robots. So we're kind of talking 70s, 80s. And now into Industry 4.0, which is the smart factory. So it's basically having items that are connected to the internet now, like robots, who can kind of help produce stuff. So like the Amazon warehouses we talked about. So we are here in Industry 4.0, and very soon we'll move on to Industry 5.0, which will be something different again, moving things to the next level. And it just gives you this graphic just shows you the difference between the two. So kind of we're moving from this kind of more reactive way to being more now incisive and moving things kind of forward. So Connor, as you mentioned about those kind of minute changes, so the 1% we're kind of hitting in Supply Chain 4.0 about improving things moving forward. We're coming towards the end, so stay with me. Last few slides just to go, and then I'll open the floor up to lots of questions. So we've got some building blocks that sit behind Supply Chain 4.0. So it's things like system integration. It is the big data and analytics, simulation and virtualization. So, you know, the old 3D headsets you can kind of put on these days. When you're building your warehouse, what you should actually do is to do simulation, virtualization, twinning, where you kind of put these headsets up and go, what do I think I need? So if I kind of create it online and then put the headset on, then you can kind of move around and go, is this what I want? So is actually that in the right place? Is that in the right place? Should it be here? Should it be there? You can do it with your homes as well. When you design your home or redesign your bedroom or your living room, whatever, put one of these headsets on there, you can go, well, does that actually work for me? So we're doing a lot of that these days. Internet of Things. So basically anything that plugs into the internet, it can kind of help you manage your business sort of moving forward. The cloud, we're all using the cloud for one thing or another. Make sure that we're doing that within our businesses. Cybersecurity, massive thing at the moment. You'll have seen, I think Marks and Spencer's was probably the latest one that got hit with a cybersecurity thing. And it was 3 kids that did it. They were like teenagers, I'm sure they were, weren't they? You know, it absolutely killed M&S for a large period of time. So cybersecurity is a real threat that is happening to every business at this moment in time. And we need to be aware of that. Obviously, within the group, we've got our own cybersecurity training and whatever. Strongly recommend you kind of go on all that. Having autonomous systems, augmented reality, that I kind of touched on before, and additive manufacturing or 3D printing, which I touched on earlier. So lots of different new things that are coming on board within supply chain, or are in place, sorry, on supply chain 4.0. Who knows what's coming next, but there will be more things. Just before I move on, any questions at this point? We're going to move into the very last bit now, which is just around sustainability, last few slides. Any questions online from you guys? Are you still awake, still with me?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Thank you. Sorry, any questions from the group? All right. So last bit, and I mentioned at the very beginning about sustainability and how important being green is. It is taking over now, and everything that we need to do we've got to factor in sustainability, net zero, and try and hit our emissions targets, whatever we're doing. So whether that's doing something completely new or whether that's adapting what we've already got in place. So believe it or not, back in the 80s, we were talking about sustainability. So the sustainability concept appeared for the first time in 1987 in the famous Brundtland report. It also entitled Our Common Future, produced by several countries for the UN, of which Britain was one of them. So we've been talking about it for some time, just not been doing a great deal about it, or certainly back in those days, in my view. So we're creating a number of different things. We've got things like net zero that we are committing to, but something else that's been put in place and was implemented in 2020, created a little bit before that, something called the SDGs. Have you heard of SDGs? Yeah, Sustainable Development Goals. Now, this is something that's been created by the UN to help all countries, all organisations, and depending on how big you are and how many people that you employ depends on how relevant some of these things are. But the 17 goals they put forward, what they're asking businesses to basically do, or organisations, is to do some commitment around some of them, not all of them. If you do all of them, brilliant. If you can't, then don't worry too much. But there are certain ones in here that are more relevant to others. Some things you will be doing it today and you don't even realise you're doing it as an organisation. So, for example, pick on clean water and sanitation. Hopefully, within the UK, that's a given, not an issue at all. But when you think about your supply chain, is that a given within your supply chain? So is there some work that you can do within your supply chain to kind of help that? Yeah, you kind of have a look through these, and some of them say are more relevant than others for you. You know, zero hunger. But I'd love to say in the UK that's not an issue, but it is an issue. But it is less an issue for us than maybe some of the third world countries that are kind of out there. But it's something, again, you can harness, you can have a look at and say within our organisation, what are we doing about it? But I think the 3 pillars, which is something that we can absolutely do something with, is having a think about these in terms of everything that we kind of do, which is around environmental sustainability, economic sustainability, and social sustainability. So if you look at that as a Venn diagram, ultimately, we are here to run an organisation. We are here to make money. That's what we're here to do. So that's the lead on any organisation, typically. But what we can do is start factoring these different elements in. I mentioned about ESG, environmental social governance, CSR, social corporate responsibility, is making sure that we're doing the best we can for the people that work for us, the people that sit within our supply chain, the environments that we kind of work in. What are we doing to make sure that we are implementing these 3 pillars of sustainability? Really, really important for any size business. Even for my business, which is me, one-man band, you know, what am I doing? I mentioned about my hybrid car, trying to do something there. I try not to print stuff off if I can help it. If I could do a meeting on Zoom rather than actually driving something, I'll try and do that. So every business can kind of do something. And I mentioned about the carbon net zero plan that we've got in place. So we've got a plan, we've got a timeline that's in place. Who knows whether that's going to change beyond what's there? Probably will do. But the government has kind of committed to stuff. It's put things in place. And as a business, you know, we've got to follow suit whatever the government's telling us to kind of do. Although that is applicable to your industry, not the same for every industry. And in terms of coming back to your supply chain, so the role of supply chain in building sustainable futures, it's just to kind of have a think about the following. So making sure that you think about that last mile. So think about the guy that I saw that was delivering in Valencia on his electric scooter that had a really good back end. He's going down cobbled streets. He's going down sort of areas that big lorries can't go down. But he's looking after that last mile with an electric, in theory, low emission, no emission. So he was accepted in that environment rather than a nice dirty truck sort of driving around. Think about reverse logistics. So if I'm sending a vehicle out there, can I bring it back? Put something on rather than just fresh air coming back in. Optimizing our warehouses. Think about our product and process engineering. Are we doing that in the best way possible? Reduction of energy consumption, scraps and waste. So I'm maximizing that piece of wood that I'm carving up, for example, that bit of metal, sheet metal that I'm kind of working through. And then look at my energy costs. Implementing things like Industry 4.0 that I mentioned. Adoption of certification standards and international guidelines. And that could come from customers as well as customers and suppliers, as well as just what our industry tells us to do or our government tells us to do. Using combined transport solutions that could be a more effective way. So using trains, which are an underutilized resource. Upgrading our fleets to being environmentally friendly. Sharing economy applied logistics fleets. So maybe sharing resources. And then generally our communication towards stakeholders and final consumers. Now, I can't remember if I got one more slide or not. Of course, I've got to talk about IKEA because I've mentioned it all through today. But just an action that they're going through. You know, their terms there: reduce, replace, and rethink. So constantly are looking at what they're doing to say, can we be better? And they put some targets in place. There we go. Ship goods only on zero emission vessels by 2040. So IKEA have signed up and said, this is what we're doing. Who can help us on that journey? Ironically, that's what Uniserve do. We're helping them on their journey. And that, folks, is the end of the workshop. I appreciate we've gone through a lot of stuff. Maybe a little bit too much, I don't know. So the idea of today was to try and bring you up a point or two on your levels. Hopefully we've kind of done that. So we'll share some information with you as well. You'll need to go back, decompress and kind of go, what did we go through today? If you've got follow-up questions, you can ask me now, but afterwards you can always send me some follow-up questions and just say, didn't quite understand that. Doing my sales pitch, we have a number of other courses. I can bore you to death with more information, more detail than we've gone through today. Should you want to learn about more things. But today has been about trying to give you that foundational knowledge from taking you from the start of the supply chain to the end of the supply chain. And I'm hoping I might have done that. Any questions? Or are you just thinking, I just want to get the hell out of it?
I'll be quick because everyone's stuck. I have a question. So in terms of one of the big things that I'm excited to do.
Yep.
So for me, in terms of training and delivery, I feel like it's happens Marx's and Harrods, it is a major factor in businesses. What training should be delivered to all staff in understanding how cybersecurity is? Is there a different level of training that could be delivered across certain teams, or should it be a standardised training system so everyone understands it like fundamentals? Just one fully job.
So I'm not the right person to answer that question. I don't think, Loretta. Please, Michaela, yeah.
So within supply chain, it was our previous suite, and it will have spoke to that business needs, because you need fundamentals of supply chain. So if you're just sitting in the business, your employee to understand your risk to that business, if they're not doing something silly, or what do you think would be right thing, then it will be like fundamentals of supply chain. Those cyber security. But then there needs to be different stages, depending on what systems you work with, what's your risk category and everything. So there are different levels to different employees, different positions, different levels of the hierarchy as well. But that's a really general question, but it's not, definitely not one size fits all.
For the folks online, it was a question around what's the most appropriate sort of cybersecurity training to have. Looking internally within the Uniserv group to say, what we've got, is that right? So Michaela just answered the question, which was, we have something, but we need to create some more training depending on the role, the level that you're working at, and making sure it's relevant to what you're doing. So I think we have a standardized, I know I've done a standardized training module, which was good, which was really useful to kind of go through. But is that enough? Yeah, question with it, where it is. Any other questions from in the room? Yes, Sam.
So we're working with a lot of businesses, transport logistics, one of our key industries. Actually, I'm not aware of what actually is. In terms of things I'm not aware of what actually logistics is and transport and that sort of stuff. What would you say, I suppose, it's the top or key aspects of logistics that businesses need to training for? Is there a key sort of area that people come across that is just not getting or not understanding or need to move on?
I mentioned earlier about what does good look like, and typically people don't describe, document, put which numbers in there that says this is what I want. So generally what happens is you just go hand it over to the logistics guys and they'll just deal with it, and then it arrives and you go, well, that didn't meet my expectations. Well, did you explain what that was, and have you chosen the right provider to provide the support that you need? Well, no, I didn't have that discussion. I didn't document, because lots of providers will provide different levels of service at different cost levels, at different lead times. So it's got to be what's applicable to you, and then you can hold them to account on that moving forward. So typically people don't do that piece of work. They just assume everyone is the same and they know what I need, so they'll just deliver it, when it is not the case at all. So I'd say it's understanding that. That way you'll get your cost in the right place, your efficiency and your timelines, which will affect, or your lead times that will affect.
The massive
customers.
cost, actually, supply chain company is all visual management, like leadership skills. It's often what we see in a lot of businesses. You're really, really good at a job, you get promoted into the next level, pick up someone that's excellent at that level, and then the next level, there's no support mechanisms around the knowledge system to be able to lead a team of 10, for example. They've got no experience. So interestingly, that's the main, regardless of what industry, that's the main training is middle management and leadership skills, that how do we organise a team, what's the narrative, etc.
It's quite clear in that sort of engineering aspect. A lot of technical engineers have got a job.
Yeah.
Then the difference is that so it's just saying to me that there's one that I was provided building and very forward specialist apprenticeship, which is sort of like export documentation, like these sorts of support. It's a key way to get to train up to developing for the future of logistics and because not at school and college, no one's aware of it, just drive and truck. So it really is such an important topic and to keep monitoring what we're doing, what we get, just sort of what we want to supply chain. as well as the boards.
For the guys online, if you didn't hear that, so it was a conversation about training in particular.
Okay.
So Michaela was saying that we're getting asked a lot around upskilling. So upskilling of people within the business already, whether that's formally or informally. So we are looking at middle management in particular about trying to find different ways in which to upskill those, either from a technical standpoint or from a general standpoint. So that's the demand that's coming in at this moment in time. And then Sam was just saying, and there's particular people like engineers, there is a lack of engineers out there, or a lack of knowledge of what actually sits within logistics, operations, or engineering. Is it just working in a warehouse, driving a van? What is it? So people just not knowing. So that's an area that Supply Chain Academy are focusing on in terms of doing that upskilling. As you know, Mike, in terms of the conversations that we've been having. So it's understanding that broader range of support that's available from us that can help businesses in other areas.
Yeah.
Any questions online? From anyone? Okay. Anything more from the room? All good? Okay.
That's great.
Thank you very much. You've been the best group ever, as I will tell my wife on the way home. Really useful, but feel free to follow up with me. Contact details are there. So if you need to contact me, then just give me a shout and I will do my very best to answer any questions that you may have. Mike will catch up afterwards.